Chapter 2058. What audacity! You actually dare to covet my things. You're courting death. A rank 9 Imperial Emperor from the bandit group was enraged. He was prepared to beat the shit out of the Sword God's clone. However, after attacking for a while, he was unable to do anything to the Sword God's clone. The Sword God's clone could not be bothered to pay attention to him. He continued to use the eyes of assassination and flash behind other people. This method allowed him to obtain quite a few good things. Unfortunately, the people that died were all from the Heaven Martial City. Their cultivation was not higher than rank 6 Imperial Emperors. Thus he did not obtain much. Soon the people from the Heaven Martial City were slaughtered to the point that they threw away their armor and fled. Seeing this, the people from the Heaven Martial City also left. After today there would likely be no more Heaven Martial City. However, right at this moment, suddenly the fifth heaven was torn open. An old man stepped on golden light and descended. His appearance caused the bandit group to stop. No, it should be the oppressive might emitted by the old man that caused everyone to be unable to move. Apart from the Sword God's clone, no one was able to escape. Oh, interesting. The old man raised his brows. His gaze landed on the Sword God's clone. Then he looked away. The Sword God's clone glanced at him. He was slightly shocked. This old man came from the sixth heaven. Furthermore, he possessed the ability to tear apart the fifth heaven. He was at least an eternal imperial emperor. What did he want to do in the fifth heaven? At this moment the old man continued. A few days ago an abnormal change occurred in this region. A golden light tore apart the fifth heaven. Did anyone see that? Once those words were said, everyone was stunned. However, Yi Xian raised his brows when he heard those words. Golden light tore apart the fifth heaven. Wasn't that the guiding golden light from the ninth heaven? At that time that guiding golden light had brought Luoluo away. Yi Xian was present. But why was this old man investigating this? If anyone saw it, tell me and I'll reward you greatly. The old man added. However, no one answered him. Helpless, the old man could only wave his hand and gather the countless people from the Heaven Martial City. Following that, the large sack in his hand suddenly enlarged in size and sucked everyone into it. This time, even the Sword God's doppelganger was not spared and was directly sucked into the magic treasure. Of course, it was Yi Xian who took the initiative. The Sword God doppelganger had an invincible body. Unless it was attacked, the effects of pressure were useless against it. Yi Xian took the initiative to enter this transcendent artifact, because he wanted to see what the other party was up to. If he wanted to leave, he could just recall the Sword God avatar. What is this old man trying to do? Yi Xian thought to himself. At this time, the people who had been taken into the bag were all confined in a small array. After an unknown period of time, the bag opened again, and a large number of people came in. It must be understood that there were millions of people in Sky Martial City, all of whom were at least at the Samsara Downlord level. It was Yi Xian's first time seeing a magic treasure that could take in so many people other than his own devouring space. This old man had run all over the area. As long as there was a living thing, he would capture it. Yi Xian seemed to understand what the old man was doing. The old man was probably going to bring everyone back and search their souls one by one. Just like that, a month passed. A month later, a gust of wind suddenly blew in the bag and blew everyone out. After Yi Xian landed, he looked around and found that there were countless people around him. This number was probably more than 10 billion. Any imperial emperor would be able to sense a place countless miles away. With so many people gathered together, they would be able to sense it. This was probably just the tip of the iceberg. At this time, everyone was suppressed to the point that they could not move, and a few figures stood in the air. The old man who had taken Yi Xian away spoke slowly. Everyone, let me introduce myself first. I am the sect master of the sixth heaven Khanate Gate. I invited everyone here to investigate a matter. Since everyone said that they did not see it, I will search your souls one by one. Without another word, the Khanate Gate sect master sucked one of the people over and began the soul search. The soul search was not long, only a second. But don't forget that there were countless people here. If he wanted to search their souls one by one, who knew how long it would take? Not to mention everyone, even if there were 100 million people, it would take at least 3 years to complete the soul search. Not to mention there were hundreds of millions of people here. After thinking for a while, Yixian used the divine devouring space to create something. It was a floating image crystal that he had extracted from his memory. It was the scene of Luo Luo's ascension. However, since this floating image crystal was extracted from his memory, it could be modified by the divine devouring space. He modified the scene to be the scene of Luo Luo's ascension by chance, while he had only seen it by chance. Immediately he began to think. Previously, the Khanate Gate sect master said that there would be a reward if he told him the situation. But what kind of reward would it be? After a while, Yixian made up his mind and decided to hand over the floating image crystal. Perhaps this Khanate Gate sect master had something to do with the golden light that led to Luo Luo's departure. Immediately he said, "Senior, this junior has a floating image crystal that you will definitely be interested in." What? Hearing this, the Khanate Gate sect master raised an eyebrow and said, "Let me see." Then Yixian tossed the floating image crystal over, and the Khanate Gate sect master scanned it. "As expected," muttered the Khanate Gate sect master. Then in a flash, he appeared in front of Yixian and asked, "Do you know this young lady who ascended?" "This junior doesn't know her. This junior happened to pass by and saw this scene," replied Yixian. "But I saw that she seemed to be talking to you?" asked the Khanate Gate sect master. "Yes, she was asking me for help. But this junior is too weak to do anything." Yixian shook his head and said. The Khanate Gate sect master fell silent. That day he had also seen that golden light. However, that golden light had broken through from the seventh heaven. It had directly pierced through the sixth heaven, and then picked up a person. So, he wanted to investigate this matter. However, he couldn't find any clues. I thought too much. The seventh heaven is still too far away from us. The sect leader of the pre-celestial sect shook his head, then tossed a stone to Yixian and said, "I see that you're a talent for being able to withstand my pressure. From now on, you can cultivate under my sect." Yixian took the stone and looked at it. He couldn't help but gasp. Chapter 2059. "Thank you, sect master." Yixian hurriedly thanked him. Then the experts of the innate heaven sect sent these people back. Of course, most of them were willing to stay in the innate heaven sect. If they were given a choice between the fifth heaven and the innate heaven sect, many of them would choose to stay in the innate heaven sect. Even though the innate heaven sect was the weakest of the sixth heaven sects, its foundation was not something the fifth heaven sects could compare to. The opportunities in the sixth heaven were much better than in the fifth heaven. For example, although the sect master of the innate heaven sect was unknown, he was at least an eternal emperor. In the fifth heaven, there were only a few eternal emperors, and each of them controlled a region. There was not much room for improvement. Then, Yixian was brought to the innate heaven sect by an eternal emperor expert. Yixian's aptitude was just right to become an outer disciple. After everything was arranged, Yixian turned his attention to the eternal fate stone. He did not know what grade the previous eternal fate stone was. It was too high, so he could not devour it. However, he could sense that this eternal fate stone was lower than the previous one. Devour. Without another word, Yixian gave it a try. Ding! Host has devoured an eternal fate stone. Ding! Host has broken through. Host is now a 7th rank imperial emperor. The system notified. A 7th rank imperial emperor had surpassed Zi Feng. This time he had not come in vain. He had increased 3 levels in one go. However, as his cultivation level increased, those black gold stones were useless. Only the black gold stones were of some use. Next he had to plan a new path. His first goal was to break through. Only by breaking through could he find Luo Luo quickly, and beat up the mysterious person who had taken her away. If he wanted to increase his cultivation level, it was simple. He just had to keep stealing. However, Yixian felt that this method was not feasible, so he thought about it. At this time, he happened to pass by the innate heaven sect's training hall. There were many missions inside. He went in to take a look and really found a suitable mission for him. This mission was to kill an eternal emperor-level holy beast and bring back its corpse. The reason this mission attracted Yixian's attention was because of the sacred beast called the Undying Phoenix. The Undying Fire Seed within the Undying Phoenix was a necessity to activate the Undying Sword Servant. As long as Yixian activated the Sword Servant of the Undead, he would have the ability to rise from the ashes once. Eternal Emperor level? That's nothing. Yi Xian raised an eyebrow. In the previous battle in Heaven Martial City, his divine sword technique had already recovered, so he could still use it once. In addition, given his current realm, he should be able to kill an Eternal Emperor level Undying Phoenix. He immediately left the innate Heaven Gate and headed for the Undying Flame Mountain. A few days later, he arrived at the Undying Flame Mountain. The temperature here was terrifyingly high because these were the undying flames left behind by the Undying Phoenix. Even if there was nothing to burn, this flame could continue to burn. The Undying Flame Mountain was very famous in this area. Very few people who entered could come out alive. As his original body was still in the fifth heaven, Yi Xian sent his sword god clone in to investigate. These terrifying undying flames were completely useless against the sword god avatar. However, the Undying Flame Mountain was very barren. After the sword god clone entered, he did not see any other living things. However, on the second day after he entered the Undying Flame Mountain, he suddenly heard a series of loud sounds. Rumble. Hearing this sound, Yi Xian raised an eyebrow and hurried over to take a look. Sure enough, someone was fighting the Undying Phoenix of the Undying Flame Mountain. Yi Xian focused his eyes and saw that it was 3 youths besieging the Undying Phoenix. These 3 people were only 9th grade Imperial Emperors, but they were very strong among their peers. Therefore, when the 3 of them joined forces, they were able to fight the Undying Phoenix to a draw. At this moment, the 3 of them noticed Yi Xian. One of them shouted, "If you don't want to die, scram!" Yi Xian was only a 7th grade Imperial Emperor right now. He was simply not worthy of their attention. However, that person's tone caused Yi Xian to feel extremely displeased. "If I don't teach you all a lesson, how can I be called Yi Xian?" Yi Xian raised an eyebrow. Ever since Lualua was kidnapped for no reason, his emotions had fluctuated greatly. To put it simply, these 3 people were courting death. Immediately, Old Tree, Black Horn and the Black Gold Sword attendants charged toward them. Not only that, the sword god clone flashed behind them and ruthlessly slashed down with his sword. Clang! A crisp sound was heard. The sword god clone's sword landed on the Undying Phoenix's armor. Eternal Emperor artifact? Yi Xian was stunned. It seemed that these 3 guys had some background. They actually had an Eternal Emperor artifact. Previously, the supreme grade black gold stone he obtained in the 5th heaven could only be used to forge a middle grade Emperor artifact. It could not even be used to forge a high grade Emperor artifact, let alone an Eternal Emperor artifact. However, it was not that easy to block Yi Xian's attack with an Eternal Emperor artifact. Don't forget that these 3 people were provoking the Undying Phoenix. When the Undying Phoenix saw that Yi Xian was helping it naturally would not attack Yi Xian. Originally, the 3 people's combat strength was on par with the Undying Phoenix. However, with the addition of Yi Xian and the others, they instantly fell into a deadlock. "Bastard, do you know who we are?" The young man spoke again. "Even if your father is the King of Heaven, you will still die today." Yi Xian widened his eyes and attacked with all his might. No matter how powerful the Eternal Emperor artifact was, it could not block so many attacks. After all, the Eternal Emperor artifact needed the blessing of the heavens, and the heavens needed the support of the saint power. In the face of such a powerful attack, their saint power was rapidly depleted. Soon they were running out. "Let's go." The young man in the lead glanced at Yi Xian and shouted in a low voice, "It's not that easy to leave. Stay here." Yi Xian's eyes flashed. A divine sword suddenly appeared out of thin air and slashed horizontally. Rip! Although they were wearing Eternal Emperor artifacts, they were still as fragile as tofu in the face of the Heaven Splitter divine sword. Yi Xian used this sword to directly kill 2 people. What a terrifying attack! The young man in the lead was shocked when he saw this. Even an Eternal Emperor could not kill 2 people in a row, let alone Yi Xian, who was only a 7th grade Imperial Emperor. What a joke! Before he could react, the Undying Phoenix on the other side spat out a mouthful of undying flames. The saint power in his body was rapidly depleted. In the end, it was exhausted. "No, I'm from the Iceblade Villa. I can't die." The young man in the lead roared. Chapter 2060. Soon, the leader could not hold on any longer, and was beheaded by the sword god's doppelganger. The universe ring and Tianming fell into the sword god's doppelganger's hands. Then the sword god's doppelganger quickly devoured Tianming and summoned the beast god Bell. Once the beast god Bell was summoned, the undying phoenix's strength decreased by 80%. Moreover, it was injured by the three of them. Coupled with Yixian's sword god bloodline, its strength was only slightly stronger than an ordinary 9th grade imperial emperor. In a short while, it was besieged and killed by the sword god's doppelganger. Undying fire seed. Yixian quickly took out the undying Huabel from the undying phoenix and used it to activate the undying swordsman. Ding! The undying swordsman has been successfully activated. The system notified. Yixian immediately summoned the undying swordsman. The undying swordsman was wearing white bone armor and a white bone mask that only revealed its eyes. Yixian did not know how strong it was. Yixian quickly ordered the undying swordsman to fight with the black gold swordsman. To his surprise, the undying swordsman's strength was on par with the black gold swordsman that had been strengthened many times. No, to be precise, the undying swordsman was slightly stronger. That was because the undying swordsman had a resurrection skill. However, the black gold swordsman did not share the resurrection skill. Not bad, not bad. Another capable member. Yixian nodded in satisfaction. Then, he suddenly glanced at the other swordsmen that had yet to be activated and felt an urge to activate them. Each swordsman was stronger than the last. If all of them were activated, it would be awesome. Especially the 100 Beast swordsman. It could summon hundreds of powerful sacred beasts at once. That was not the point. The point was that Yixian had another bloodline, the battle god bloodline. The 100 Beast swordsman could summon hundreds of battle god mounts at once when used with the battle god mount skill. What the F***ck? Yixian had completed the chain random mission and was guaranteed to summon at least a gold grade mount. In other words, as long as the 100 Beast swordsman was activated, Yixian could summon hundreds of gold grade mounts at once. Perhaps there might even be a platinum grade mount that surpassed gold grade. TSK. Yixian couldn't help but laugh. However, the 100 Beast sword attendant was not so easy to activate. It required Yixian to kill 100 saint beasts with noble bloodlines. This undying phoenix just so happened to be one of them. Therefore, Yixian still needed to kill 99 other holy beasts of the same bloodline before he could be considered a holy beast. This is a tough mission. Yixian thought to himself as he took a look at the mission he had obtained from the Xiantian Gate. There were also 3 types of missions to hunt saint beasts, and the bloodlines of these saint beasts were not bad. At that moment, Yixian made his move again. However, what he didn't know was that the 3 young men he just killed all had special treasures on them that could record what they saw before they died. Therefore, the scene of Yixian killing them had already been sent back to their clans. At this moment, somewhere in the 6th heaven. Bastard! A mere innate heaven gate dares to kill a member of my Ice Sky Mountain Villa? You are courting death. The higher-ups of the Ice Edge Villa were enraged. They immediately sent out their experts and rushed towards the innate heaven gate. Yixian, who didn't know about this, was still on his way. Soon he found the second holy beast, suppressed it with the beast god Bell, and killed it. He had already obtained 2 of the 100 bloodlines. Then he continued on his way. More than 10 days later he completed all the missions. Then, he prepared to leave and return to the innate heaven gate. After all, he still had rewards for these missions. However, when Yixian returned to the innate heaven gate, he found that it was a mess. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. What happened? Yixian raised his eyebrows. He had only left for a short time, and the innate heaven gate was annihilated. Wasn't this too bad? He felt that it was a little strange, so he kept all the corpses and searched their souls. After searching, he found out who the culprit was. The people of the Ice Edge Villa massacred the entire innate heaven gate? Yixian suddenly recalled that when he was in the Undying Flame Mountain, the young man in the lead said that he was from the Ice Edge Villa. Now it seemed that the Ice Edge Villa couldn't find him, so they came to the innate heaven gate. In short, he was the source of all this. He was the one who harmed the innate heaven gate. Rest in peace for now. When I am strong enough, I will resurrect you. Yixian kept all the corpses of the innate heaven gate and kept them safe. As long as his strength grew in the future, it would be easy to resurrect these people. But now there was one more thing to do, and that was to destroy the Ice Edge Villa. Although he was the one who killed the disciple of the Ice Edge Villa, that person had a foul mouth. In today's world, it was not strange to kill an entire family because of a word. Moreover, this was in the sixth heaven, so it was obviously crueler. Yixian immediately rushed in a direction. The villa master of the Ice Edge Villa was only a third-grade eternal emperor, 5 realms higher than Yixian, so the difficulty was not very high. About 7 days later he arrived outside the Ice Edge Villa. Sword God Clone, go. Without saying a word, he directly sent the Sword God Clone into the Ice Edge Villa. Kill everyone on sight. Anyone who reached the Eternal Emperor level had to die. Immediately, a bloody storm broke out outside the Ice Edge Villa. Which scoundrel dares to act so presumptuously in my Ice Edge Villa? You're courting death. Many people rushed out of the Ice Edge Villa. All of them were Eternal Emperors, but they were only first-grade Eternal Emperors. Immediately, Yixian's side fought the experts of the Ice Edge Villa. This time Yixian came with the intention of destroying the Ice Edge Villa, so he would not show mercy. The Sword God Clone, Undying Swordsman, and Black Gold Swordsman blocked the Ice Edge Villa's Eternal Emperors. As for the Old Tree and Black Horn, they dealt with the others. War God Mount. In order to increase efficiency, the Sword God Clone used a big move and summoned a Gold Great Mount. This time it was the Golden Behemoth. Boom! This was a colossal creature that was 100,000 meters tall. With a casual stomp, it could trample many people to death. Balls of heavens floated out of the corpses and were devoured by the Old Tree and Black Horn. Then the balls of heavens were devoured by Yixian. Although his realm did not increase, Yixian's will of heavens was constantly rising, so his strength was also soaring. At this time the Sword God Clone suddenly used a trump card that he had never used before. War God Domain. As soon as this skill was used, the entire world froze. At this time the only one who could move was Yixian's side, and another first-grade Eternal Emperor. Chapter 2061. During the duel the entire world was forbidden. The two would decide the victor in the God of War domain. If the Sword God Clone won, he would temporarily gain a boost in strength. But if he lost, the Sword God Clone and Yixian would permanently lose 10% of their combat strength. Yixian could only use this skill when he was determined to win. Although it was impossible for the Sword God Clone to lose, there was a time limit to the God of War domain. Once the time was up he would lose. But that wasn't the point. The point was that the Old Tree, Black Horn, Undying Sword Servants, Black Gold Sword Servants, and Golden Behemoth could all move. Simply put, it was a gang fight. What's going on? The Ice Edge Villa's Eternal Emperor was shocked. He saw that everyone else had stopped moving. Even the sword chi that pierced through the air was the same. However, he and his enemies were still able to move. What was going on? Before he could react, the Sword God Clone and the others launched an attack. Although he was an Eternal Emperor, 2 fists were no match for 4. Soon he was killed by the Sword God Clone. Ding! Host has obtained the Invincible God of War effect. As the system notification sounded, the strength of Yixian and his subordinates all skyrocketed. His killing speed had also increased by several folds. Impudent! At this moment, a roar suddenly came from the sky. The Sword God Clone turned around and saw several powerful auras rushing toward him. The higher-ups of the Ice Edge Villa are finally here? The Sword God Clone looked and found that he had seen 2 of them in the memories of the Innate Heaven sect disciples. These 2 second-stage Imperial Emperors were the murderers who had slaughtered the entire Innate Heaven sect. I finally found you. Die! Yixian was furious. He directly ordered the Sword God Clone to attack. In an instant, he flashed behind one of them and slashed with his sword. Unfortunately, the other party had an Eternal Emperor weapon and was a second-stage Imperial Emperor. Even with the Invincible God of War effect, he couldn't break through the other party's defense. Humph! The other party snorted and turned around to send the Sword God Clone flying. Right now, the Sword God's avatar was unable to break through the opponent's defense. However, things were different now. At that moment, several rank 1 Imperial Emperors had already died, and Yixian had obtained their Eternal Fate Stones. After devouring, he would break through. Ding! Host has made a breakthrough. Host is now a rank 8 Imperial Monarch. Once a cultivator made a breakthrough, their strength would increase exponentially. Now that Yi Xian was only 3 levels away from his opponent, he should be able to pose a threat to him. Die. Seeing that his opponent was unscathed, the rank 2 Eternal Emperor struck out with his sword again. However, before the sword chi could pierce through the air, the Eternal Emperor weapon in his hand suddenly exploded. Sword burst. Bang! The Eternal Emperor weapon exploded into countless fragments, directly killing the weaker Imperial Emperors below. And this was just an appetizer. Make the storm worse. Yi Xian's eyes flickered. In the next moment, the Emperor weapons and Eternal Emperor weapons all exploded. Sharp whistling sounds rang out. In an instant, almost all of the people from Ice Edge Villa below were killed. At the same time, among the group of people in the air, only the long sword in the hand of the Villa Master of Ice Edge Villa was intact. After all, it was the treasure of Ice Edge Villa. Bastard, I'll definitely kill you. Ice Edge Villa Master was furious. Just that blow alone had killed several rank 1 Eternal Emperors of Ice Edge Villa. As for the Imperial Emperors, they had lost countless of them. With his cultivation level, it was easy for him to resurrect those Imperial Emperors. However, even he would have to pay a huge price to resurrect a rank 1 Eternal Emperor. Haha, kill me if you dare. Yi Xian laughed 3 times and flashed behind a rank 2 Eternal Emperor. Crack! A crisp sound rang out. Just now, the Eternal Emperor weapon long sword had exploded and pierced through the Eternal Emperor weapon battle armor. Now Yi Xian's sword had completely broken through the opponent's defense. Oh no! The rank 2 Eternal Emperor's expression changed drastically, and he quickly retreated. At the same time, the 2 rank 2 Eternal Emperors and the Villa Master of Ice Edge Villa attacked together in an attempt to stop Yi Xian's attack. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's attack was impossible to guard against. Whoosh! The Sword God's avatar's figure disappeared and reappeared behind the Grade 2 Eternal Emperor. With a sweep of his sword, the rank 2 Eternal Emperor's head flew up. Dead. A rank 2 Eternal Emperor was very important to Ice Edge Villa. There were only 3 of them in the villa. Now one of them was dead. Even in Ice Edge Villa, rank 3 Eternal Emperors were not enough to be resurrected. Before the crowd could react, the Sword God's doppelganger flashed behind another person and attacked again. Be careful. With the previous example, this person was much smarter than the one who had died. He quickly turned around and slashed at the Sword God clone, sending it flying. It was a joke. 3 rank 2 Eternal Emperors and 1 rank 3 Eternal Emperor could not do anything to an rank 8 Eternal Emperor. If news of this spread, they would definitely be laughed at to death. However, if word of this spread, then so be it. After all, by the time this matter spread, the Ice Edge Villa would no longer exist. While the Sword God clone was stalling for time, Old Tree, Black Horn, Black Gold Swordsman, Undying Swordsman, and Golden Behemoth were crazily killing. The Black Gold Swordsman could be strengthened with ores and the like, while the Undying Swordsman could be strengthened with heavenly treasures of the death attribute. Because they were in the same realm as Yi Xian, the strengthening effect was very obvious. At this moment, W&G lay. Suddenly, a violent roar resounded through the sky. Immediately after, a corpse fell from the sky and disappeared into thin air halfway down. Another rank 2 Eternal Emperor had been killed by the Sword God clone. Now, only 1 rank 2 Eternal Emperor and the Villa Master of Ice Edge Villa, a rank 3 Eternal Emperor, were left. As for the rank 1 Eternal Emperors, they were all dead. I'd rather die than live in dishonor. The Villa Master of Ice Edge Villa made a difficult decision with bloodshot eyes. He took out a light blue stone from his interspatial ring and wrapped it with his heaven's will. In the next moment, a snowstorm blew in Ice Edge Villa. Huh. Yi Xian raised his eyebrows and felt the surrounding temperature drop sharply. The entire Ice Edge Villa froze in an instant. Not only that, but even the living were the same. What's going on? Yi Xian was a little confused. He turned his head and found that the remaining rank 2 Eternal Emperor and the Villa Master of Ice Edge Villa had also turned into ice sculptures. In addition, the Black Gold Swordsman, Undying Swordsman, Old Tree, Black Horn, and the huge Golden Behemoth were also frozen. Except for the Sword God clone, everyone was frozen. Chapter 2062. At that moment, Yi Xian sent his Sword God doppelganger to try it out. He found that his full-powered attack could not break through the layer of ice. Moreover, it could not be swallowed. It seemed that the light blue stone was a good thing. Ding! The flame-engulfing unicorn is sealed by ice and cannot be recalled. Ding! The engulfing black-scaled dragon is sealed by ice and cannot be recalled. Ding! The black gold swordsman is sealed by ice and cannot be recalled. Ding! The immortal swordsman is sealed by ice and cannot be recalled. System notifications rang in Yixian's mind. This was troublesome. The old tree and the others were frozen, not dead. Otherwise, they could be resurrected. However, Yixian had a way, and that was to use the divine sword technique. At that moment, he landed on the ground. Then, his eyes flashed and he directly used his trump card. Divine sword technique. A divine sword slashed out horizontally. Everything that came into contact with it was as fragile as tofu. This divine sword first killed the old tree and black horn, then the black gold swordsman, the immortal swordsman, and finally the Villa Master of Ice Edge Villa and the second great eternal emperor. As for the others, Yixian was too lazy to kill them because their cultivation was too weak. Ding! The flame-engulfing unicorn is resurrected. Ding! The engulfing black-scaled dragon is resurrected. Ding! The immortal swordsman is resurrected. System notifications rang. The old tree and black horn were magic treasures, so they could be resurrected. The immortal swordsman had a passive resurrection, so they could be resurrected. However, the black gold swordsman could not be resurrected, so they could only be summoned again tomorrow. At that moment, Yixian was collecting the spoils of war. The Ice Edge Villa was also very rich. There were a lot of heavenly treasures in the Villa Master's interspatial ring. Ding! The host has broken through. The host is now a 9th grade Imperial Emperor. Yixian had gained a lot from this battle. He had broken through twice. At this time, his heavenly fate level had reached 64. He was just a little bit away from becoming an eternal emperor. However, things were not over yet. After Yixian cleaned up the battlefield, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky. This aura was even stronger than that of the Ice Edge Villa's Villa Master. It was most likely a rank 4 eternal emperor. Who? Yixian was a little surprised. Could it be that the Ice Peak Villa still had a hidden expert? However, even if they were rank 4 eternal emperors, they would still take too long to arrive. If it had been before, Yixian would have been afraid and would have had no choice but to hide. But now that it had appeared, he was no longer afraid. After this expert arrived, he looked around and asked, "What's going on here?" The sword god avatar was the only living person in front of him, so naturally, he was asking him. "I don't know." Yixian replied casually. This sentence made the newcomer a little displeased, but he didn't waste his breath. With a wave of his hand, he dissolved the layer of ice on one of the ice sculptures and began to search their souls. In the next moment, he knew the ins and outs of the matter. "It's you." The newcomer's gaze fell on Yixian. From the memories of the person whose soul was searched, he saw that Yixian had killed his way into the Ice Edge Villa. The Villa Master and the others were no match for him, so they used the sacred ice stone. "So what if it's me?" Yixian raised his eyebrows. "Who are you? How dare you slaughter the forces of my Ice Alliance?" asked the middle-aged man. Ice Alliance. Hearing this name, Yixian was stunned for a moment. Then he quickly searched the souls of the corpses. This was the Ice Mountain Range. There were many forces in this area, and these forces formed the Ice Alliance. This person should be from the Shrine of Ice, the leader of the Ice Alliance. The Ice Edge Villa Master had been holding the sacred ice stone that every subordinate faction's leader had. This thing was usually used when facing a destructive attack. Once it was used, everyone would be sealed in ice. Only a special method could unseal it. If you want to fight, then fight. Why are you asking so many questions? Yixian snorted coldly. "You're courting death." The middle-aged man was furious. He directly charged at Yixian. What a joke. A mere 9th rank Imperial Emperor dared to say such words in front of him. He was courting death. However, in the next moment, he realized that Yixian was not courting death. He was truly capable. In an instant, he was attacked by several people. This time, Yixian attacked with all his strength. Moreover, his opponent was not a sword cultivator, so his strength was directly reduced by 30%. Before Yixian made a breakthrough, he seemed to be able to handle the attacks of so many people with ease. Now that he had made a breakthrough, his strength had undergone a huge change. It would definitely be easier for him to deal with these people. However, it would not be so easy to kill this middle-aged man. Rumble. Immediately, the two of them began to fight. Yixian still used a besieging tactic. Old Tree, Black Horn, Deathless Swordsman, and the Sword God's clone attacked from 4 directions. This middle-aged man also had an Eternal Emperor artifact, so Yixian could only exhaust him. This battle lasted for a long time. These people, where did they come from? How dare they provoke the Ice Alliance? The middle-aged man thought to himself. He checked his saint power. There was only a third left. In the battle just now, he had continuously killed Old Tree and Black Horn. However, these two could continuously resurrect themselves. They were very difficult to deal with. Moreover, the Deathless Swordsman in the white bone armor was even more terrifying. His attack could corrode the heavenly fate. Go back and inform the palace master. The middle-aged man immediately made up his mind. If it was before, he could directly take out his communication token and report directly to his superiors. However, under the siege of 4 people, he could not find the time to do so. At this moment, Yixian saw through his opponent's intention and immediately attacked with all his strength. Sword Intent of Death. The Deathless Swordsman's ghostly fire-like eyes suddenly flickered as he slashed out a terrifying attack. This was the Deathless Swordsman's ultimate move. With Old Tree, Black Horn, and the Sword God's clone restraining him, the middle-aged man could not dodge and was directly hit. Crack! The Eternal Emperor artifact on his body shattered. However, this move did not kill him. It only severely injured him. The middle-aged man shuddered. Then, he used the remaining saint power he had and used his trump card. Journey of Ice. In an instant, the middle-aged man turned into a stream of light and swept into the distance. So fast. The Sword God's clone raised an eyebrow. This scene happened so suddenly that he could not even use the Eye of Assassination. However, the middle-aged man had a death hunt warrant, so he could not escape. Chase. Yixian immediately chased after the middle-aged man. At the same time, he also knew that the middle-aged man should be escaping back to the Shrine of Ice, the leader of the Ice Alliance. This chase lasted for a few days. Chapter 2063. However, when Yixian met with them again, he realized that they had called for help. At this time, Yixian was facing 3 rank 4 Eternal Emperors. Is this the kid who seriously injured you? A white-haired old man asked with a frown. He could sense that Yixian was only a rank 9 Eternal Emperor. He was not even an Eternal Emperor. How could he seriously injure a rank 4 Eternal Emperor? That's right. This kid's strength is very strange. He destroyed the Ice Edge Villa. The middle-aged man nodded. How is that possible? He's only a rank 9 Eternal Emperor. How could he destroy the Ice Edge Villa? The old man could not believe it. However, it was a fact that the middle-aged man was seriously injured. If he could really injure the middle-aged man, destroying the Ice Edge Villa was nothing. Since that's the case, let's capture him and bring him back to the palace master. The old man was ready. The battle was about to start. There was no need to say much about the following scene. Naturally, the Sword God's clone was beaten up by the 3 of them. As for Yixian, he was temporarily powerless. However, he still had a plan. In the past few days, his original body had found the teleportation array that led to the 6th heaven and arrived at the 6th heaven. Previously, the Sword God's clone had been brought up by the innate heaven sect master. Therefore, his original body was still in the 5th heaven. Now he had finally arrived. That was not the main point. The main point was that after he arrived, he used the Void Spirit godly armor to rob the various major powers. Ding! Host's fate has been upgraded to rank 67. Ding! Host has broken through. Host is now a rank 1 Eternal Emperor. Yixian suddenly broke through. Although the leap from rank 9 Eternal Emperor to rank 1 Eternal Emperor was not as big as the leap from Samsara Dao Lord to half-step Eternal Emperor, his strength still increased by leaps and bounds. After his breakthrough, his Sword God's clone, Old Tree, Black Horn, Undying Sword Servants, and Black Gold Sword Servants all rose to the rank of Eternal Emperor. Their strength increased by more than 10 times in an instant. What? The 3 people besieging Yixian were shocked. What was going on? These people suddenly broke through from rank 9 Eternal Emperor to rank 1 Eternal Emperor. They were shocked. In the next moment they would have to pay a heavy price for their actions. Gotcha! Suddenly, a crisp sound rang out. The Eternal Emperor weapon on the white-haired old man suddenly shattered and he was killed. Immediately after, another person appeared. Not good, a trip of ice and snow. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically as he once again used his trump card. But this time Yi Xian's speed caught up. Kacha! Kacha sound. At this moment, the sword god avatar's strength was much stronger than before because he had devoured the heaven's will of the old man and the other person. Although he had not broken through to the second great Eternal Emperor realm, his strength had increased. My shrine of ice will never let you get away with this. The middle-aged man knew that he was going to die. Therefore he raised his head and roared. Was the Eternal Emperor. The middle-aged man's head flew up, and he died on the spot. And in the blink of an eye, his aura skyrocketed again. Ding! Host made a breakthrough. Host is now a rank 2 Eternal Emperor. The three were stewards of the Shrine of Ice. They were worth a lot. After Yi Xian devoured the treasures inside, he made a breakthrough. He then searched the souls of the three corpses to get a better understanding of them. The Ice Alliance is led by the Shrine of Ice. They have 13 factions under them. Ice Peak Villa is one of them. Suddenly, a name caught Yi Xian's attention. Divine Ice Stone. There's a Divine Ice Stone in the Shrine of Ice? Yi Xian raised his eyebrows. The Divine Ice Stone was a material required by the sword servants of the 5 elements. In addition, the light blue stone that sealed everyone in ice was formed from the shards of the Divine Ice Stone. It was called the Sacred Ice Stone. Apart from the Shrine of Ice, there were 4 other factions that stood side by side with it. They were the shrines of metal, wood, fire, and earth. Coincidentally, there was a corresponding Divine Ice Stone in each of the 4 shrines. As long as Yi Xian obtained all of them, he would be able to activate the sword servants of the 5 elements, one of the strongest among the sword servants of the Unrivaled. The sword servants of the 5 elements are ranked 5th among the sword servants of the 5 elements. If I can activate them, my strength will increase by leaps and bounds. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and flew in the direction of the Shrine of Ice. The Shrine of Ice could be considered an overlord. Its palace master was a rank 6 Eternal Emperor. His strength was not bad. However, this could no longer stop Yi Xian's footsteps. Yi Xian had previously killed 3 stewards of the Shrine of Ice. From their memories, Yi Xian obtained the ice and snow martial art. This martial art was very useful in this world of ice and snow. Its speed was even faster than Wei Zhenqian's flying form. 3 days later, Sword God's doppelganger arrived at the Shrine of Ice. With the help of the Mask of Illusion, he assumed the appearance of a middle-aged man and entered the Shrine of Ice. He first went in to wander around and make some inquiries. However, the destruction of Iceblade Villa did not attract the attention of the Shrine of Ice because they thought that the matter had been resolved. Therefore, Yi Xian wanted to use his disguise to get rid of those from the Shrine of Ice one by one. But before that, Yi Xian learned one more thing. In the past, possessing a treasure was a crime. Naturally, it was the same in the 6th heaven. Previously, there were people who had designs on the Divine Ice Stone, but they were all sealed in ice by the palace master of the Shrine of Ice. These people did not die, but were all sealed in ice. 7 rank 5 Eternal Emperors and dozens of rank 4 Eternal Emperors. Yi Xian raised his eyebrows. The reason why the palace master of the Shrine of Ice did not kill them, and instead left them at the entrance of the Shrine of Ice was to serve as a warning to others not to provoke the Shrine of Ice. Since these people did not die, they were destined to die. This time Yi Xian wanted to make an example out of them. At this time, Yi Xian had already left the Shrine of Ice and arrived at the entrance. Previously, he thought that the ice sculptures at the entrance were those who had committed a crime and were sealed in ice. But now, it seemed that they were those who had designs on the Divine Ice Stone. 57 ice sculptures, all of them. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth slightly curled up. Among the 57 ice sculptures, 7 of them were rank 5 Eternal Emperors. If he added the others, it would be enough for him to make another breakthrough. As he had obtained a large amount of good stuff, he could now use the Divine Sword technique. Sword God's doppelganger found a spot and suddenly used his trump card. Divine Sword technique. A heaven splitter suddenly appeared and slashed horizontally. The heaven splitter cut all the ice sculptures in half as if they were tofu. Chapter 2064. In the next moment, Yi Xian put away everyone's corpses. Of course, there was also the most important Eternal Destiny Stone. Ding! Host has made a breakthrough. Host is now a third-rank Eternal Emperor. Yixian had made another breakthrough in his cultivation. Earlier, he had planned to use his disguise to kill the members of the Shrine of Ice one by one. But now it seemed that there was no need for that. The changes here had attracted the attention of those in the Shrine of Ice. Immediately, a bystander reported the matter. In the next moment, the upper echelons of the Shrine of Ice moved out in full force. The one leading them was the Hall Master of the Shrine of Ice. 1 6th-rank Eternal Emperor, 5 5th-rank Eternal Emperors, and more than 10 4th-rank Eternal Emperors. This kind of power was already very shocking. Yixian stood at the entrance of the Shrine of Ice. Beside his feet were the blood-stained ice crystals that he had shattered. He just watched quietly. As soon as the upper echelons of the Shrine of Ice appeared, they surrounded Yixian. "Yangshuo, what are you doing?" shouted an elder of the Shrine of Ice angrily. These ice sculptures were used by the Shrine of Ice to intimidate others. Now that they had been destroyed, wasn't it a slap in the face? Not only that, the one who destroyed the ice sculptures was one of their own. What was going on? Of course, the most important thing was that these Eternal Destiny Stones had all fallen into Yangshua's hands. If a 4th-rank Eternal Destiny Stone were to be completely refined, it would be enough for them to break through to the 5th-rank Eternal Emperor realm. To put it simply, these Eternal Destiny Stones were very valuable. "Hall Master, there's no need for these ice sculptures to exist anymore," said Yixian. "Why?" asked the Hall Master of the Shrine of Ice with a frown. "Because the Divine Ice Stone in your hands will fall into my hands," said Yixian slowly. "How dare you?" Before he could finish his words, an elder berated Yixian. At this moment, Yixian, disguised as Yangshuo, had been very cautious and conscientious in the Shrine of Ice. So why would he say such words now? But what they didn't know was that this Yangshuo was actually Yixian in disguise. Even Yangshuo's biological parents couldn't recognize him. "Yangshuo, you, a mere rank for Eternal Emperor, dare to covet the Divine Ice Stone?" It was at this moment that the Shrine of Ice's chief spoke. "Treasures have always belonged to the capable. Hall Master, I am more capable than you. If you don't give it to me, then who should you give it to?" Yixian said with narrowed eyes. "Bastard, why don't you take a look at yourself first? How dare you say such words? I'll let you know the immensity of heaven and earth." One of the elders roared and rushed towards Yixian. A rank 5 Eternal Emperor would have been very difficult for Yixian in the past. However, now that he was a rank 3 Eternal Emperor, he was not afraid at all. In the blink of an eye, he used Assassin's Eye and flash behind his opponent. Gotcha! With a crisp sound, the elder's Eternal Emperor weapon shattered. Not only that, but his head was also cleaved open, instantly killing him. Of the 5 great rank 5 Eternal Emperors in the Shrine of Ice, only 4 were left. Everyone present was shocked. "Yangshuo, how dare you? How dare you?" Immediately, an elder shouted angrily. Yangshuo, the steward of the Shrine of Ice, was a rank 4 Eternal Emperor. Although he was not very strong, he still had some weight in the Shrine of Ice. However, today he actually killed an elder with his own hands. Before the elder could finish his words, Yixian's figure flashed again and appeared behind him. Gotcha! Another crisp sound was heard, and the elder's head was sent flying. Another destiny fell into Yixian's hands. Now there were only 3 great rank 5 Eternal Emperors left in the Shrine of Ice. "You're courting death." The Shrine of Ice was furious. Every rank 5 Eternal Emperor was the foundation of the Shrine of Ice. Now that 2 of them had died at once, he was afraid that he would not be able to resurrect them with his current strength. No matter what, Yixian must die. The Shrine of Ice immediately attacked. However, his realm was only 3 levels higher than Yixian's. So what? Deal with the others first. The Sword God's doppelganger immediately released Old Tree, Black Horn, Black Gold Swordsman, and Deathless Swordsman. Mount of the War God. The Sword God's doppelganger once again summoned a powerful assistant. As he had completed a random mission previously, the system rewarded him with a gold mount of the War God. However, this time it was not a gold mount but a platinum mount. At this moment, what appeared in front of Yixian was a fiery red phoenix. This phoenix was called Evil Phoenix. Ice and fire were incompatible. As soon as this evil phoenix appeared, It fought to a draw with the Shrine of Ice's Hall Master. Originally, Yi Xian wanted to block the Shrine of Ice's Hall Master, but now it seemed that there was no need for that. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yi Xian immediately cooperated with the others to deal with the elders of the rank 5 Eternal Emperors and the steward of the rank 4 Eternal Emperor. The entire process took no more than 3 seconds. After that, the Shrine of Ice became a commander without an army. Who exactly are you? The Shrine of Ice Master could not help but ask. It was impossible for someone with such strength to work under him for so many years. This Yang Shua was definitely not the real Yang Shua. Since you've asked so sincerely, I'll be merciful and tell you the answer. The sword god's doppelganger's lips slightly curled as he revealed his true form. Sure enough, it was not Yang Shua. However, by the time the Shrine of Ice Master reacted, it was already too late. At this moment, Yi Xian had dealt with everyone. Next, it was time to deal with the Shrine of Ice Master. Eye of Assassination. In an instant, Yi Xian once again flashed behind the Shrine of Ice Master and fiercely slashed with his sword. Clang! This attack was blocked by an Eternal Emperor weapon. It seemed to be no ordinary weapon. Humph, this Eternal Emperor weapon was bestowed to me by my master. How can it be broken so easily? The Shrine of Ice Master coldly snorted. However, this was nothing to Yi Xian. Anything that could be done with time was not a problem at all. No matter how hard a tortoise's shell was, there would come a day when it would be broken. Even water droplets could penetrate stone. So Yi Xian was not afraid that he could not break it. Moreover, they had the advantage in numbers. Rumble. The sound of battle was deafening. The sword god's doppelganger, the black gold swordsman, the deathless swordsman, the old tree, the black horn, and the evil phoenix besieged the Shrine of Ice Master. Not long after, the Shrine of Ice Master could not hold on any longer. His face gradually turned gloomy. You want the divine ice stone? Fine, I'll give it to you. The Shrine of Ice Master suddenly bellowed and took out a blue stone. This blue stone was the treasure of the Shrine of Ice. The Divine Ice Stone. Chapter 2065. This snowstorm was 100 times more violent than the one at Ice Edge Villa. In an instant, everything in the surroundings was frozen. The black gold swordsman, deathless swordsman, old tree, black horn, and even the platinum-ranked evil phoenix were all frozen. Only the sword god's doppelganger was spared. What? You? The hall master of the Shrine of Ice panicked. Once the divine ice stone appeared, even he would be frozen. At this moment, the lower half of his body could no longer move. He looked at Yi Xian in astonishment. Why was Yi Xian immune to the effects of the divine ice stone? TSK. Yi Xian grinned as he watched the hall master of the Shrine of Ice turn into an ice sculpture. The hall master of the Shrine of Ice courted his own death. This was exactly what he wanted. Because of this, the hall master of the Shrine of Ice could no longer move and was at his mercy. Although the hall master of the Shrine of Ice had a pretty good Eternal Emperor weapon on him, in addition to the layer of ice formed by the divine ice stone, even a 7th rank Eternal Emperor might not be able to break through. However, one should not forget that Yi Xian possessed an unstoppable divine skill. The reason why Yi Xian dealt with the others first was because he had anticipated that this would be the outcome. At present, apart from the sword god's doppelganger, everyone was frozen. This was the perfect opportunity to replay the scene. Like before, he placed the ice sculptures together and slashed horizontally. Divine sword technique. Swish. Previously, the Villa Master of Ice Edge Villa had used the sacred ice stone condensed from the divine ice stone. This time, however, the hall master of the Shrine of Ice had used the divine ice stone, which was more than 100 times more powerful than the sacred ice stone. But even so, it was useless. In an instant, all the ice sculptures, including the hall master of the Shrine of Ice, were cut in half by the divine sword technique. They died on the spot. Yi Xian had directly obtained the mandate of a 6th rank Eternal Emperor. However, as he had just made a breakthrough, this mandate only increased his mandate level. He could not make another breakthrough. With the death of the Shrine of Ice, there was no longer a need for the Shrine of Ice to exist. At once, Yi Xian had the resurrected old tree and black horn absorb the entire Shrine of Ice into his devouring space. Ding! The divine ice stone has been successfully devoured. The activation of the 5 elements sword servants is now at 20%. The system prompted. The 5-element sword servants required 5 specific materials to activate. Their combat strength was ranked 5th among all sword servants, and they were extremely powerful. One had to know that the Undying Swordsman had barely squeezed into the top 10. After that, Yi Xian conducted a soul search on the Shrine of Ice's chief. The closest one is the Withered Wood Divine Palace? Yi Xian raised an eyebrow. There was a piece of Withered Wood Divine Stone in the Withered Wood Divine Hall, which was exactly what was needed to activate the 5-element sword attendants. Yi Xian immediately headed for the Withered Wood Shrine. Although Yi Xian was doing shady business now, he had no choice but to do so in order to find Luoluo in the 9th heaven as soon as possible. Moreover, as long as he was strong enough in the future, he could resurrect these people and even give them 100 times more cultivation resources as compensation. To put it simply, Yi Xian was just forcibly borrowing the other party's belongings. A few days later, he arrived at the Withered Wood Shrine. Compared to the Shrine of Ice, the Withered Wood Shrine was much easier to deal with. With his own strength, Yi Xian easily dealt with the people of the Withered Wood Shrine, and then absorbed them into his devouring space. At this moment he was on the verge of a breakthrough. With a little more destiny, he would be able to break through to become a 4th-grade Eternal Emperor. However, the news of the Shrine of Ice and the Withered Wood Shrine being destroyed one after another had spread to the other 3 shrines. The experts of the 3 shrines had gathered to guard against any unforeseen circumstances. If one were to rank the 5 shrines, the Shrine of Ice and the Withered Wood Shrine were at the bottom of the 5 shrines. This was because the shrine masters of the other 3 shrines were all 7th-grade Eternal Emperors with extraordinary strength. But so what? After annihilating the Withered Wood Shrine, Yi Xian headed for the Violent Earth Shrine. However, this time around he was intercepted by a group of people while he was on his way. Yi Xian, who was on his way, sensed that a group of several dozen people was approaching him. The combined aura of these people was very terrifying. There were at least 9 6th-grade Eternal Emperors. He immediately squinted his eyes and saw that these people were wearing 3 kinds of clothes. With just a glance he understood the origin of these people. It turned out that this group was formed by the experts of the 3 shrines. Their purpose was to capture Yi Xian and bring him back. Yi Xian had first destroyed the Shrine of Ice and then the Withered Wood Shrine. Therefore, the 3 shrines sent their experts to the Violent Earth Shrine, which was the closest to the Withered Wood Shrine. They were heading for the Withered Wood Shrine and coincidentally bumped into Yi Xian. Yes, that's him. At this time, a person at the front of the group took out a floating image crystal and compared it. Inside the floating image crystal was the scene of Yi Xian killing the experts of the Withered Wood Divine Hall. Although the person who recorded the floating image crystal had already been absorbed by Yi Xian into the devouring space, the floating image crystal he recorded was transmitted to the other 3 great shrines. As a result, Yi Xian was recognized at a glance. "Bastard, how dare you do such a thing? Tell us your name." The leader shouted angrily. "Anyway, I'm going to die anyway. It's useless to know my name," Yi Xian muttered, shaking his head. As soon as these words came out, it immediately aroused the disgust of the crowd. Wasn't this a little too much? Although Yi Xian had annihilated the Shrine of Ice and the Withered Wood Shrine, these 2 shrines only had 1 6th-grade Eternal Emperor each. Now they had organized 10 Eternal Emperors to capture Yi Xian. They were confident that they could even fight a 7th-grade Eternal Emperor. Not to mention that Yi Xian was only a 3rd-grade Eternal Emperor. "Go capture him first." At that moment the leader shouted angrily. Immediately after, everyone surrounded Yi Xian. But in the next moment, Yi Xian's figure disappeared from their sight. No, he didn't disappear. Some people caught sight of Yi Xian, but he was behind the leader. "Be careful," a person beside him shouted. Unfortunately, it was too late. "Gotcha!" A crisp sound was heard. The leader's Eternal Emperor weapon was directly shattered. Even his head was sent flying. There was a saying that went, "Times have changed." Although Yi Xian was still a 3rd-grade Eternal Emperor like he was when he annihilated the Shrine of Ice. But during this period of time, his heavenly fate level had increased. Back then he couldn't break the Eternal Emperor weapon of the Shrine of Ice, but today it was enough. The leader's death shocked everyone. Before they could react, the leader's heavenly fate was taken by Yi Xian. Chapter 2066. Ding! Host has made a breakthrough. Host is now a 4th-grade Eternal Emperor. A system notification rang in Yixian's mind. If he had not made a breakthrough, he would have been surrounded and beaten like a sandbag. Now that he had made a breakthrough, he did not have to fear anyone. Sure enough, after he made a breakthrough, the experts of the 3 sacred halls were like a bunch of chickens and dogs. They were all beaten to a pulp. In the end, they were all killed by Yixian. Yixian obtained the interspatial ring. Yixian devoured the heaven's will. This group of people was Yixian's second parents. They knew that Yixian was in trouble and came to give him benefits. Now that he had broken through to the 4th Great Eternal Emperor realm, there was no one in the vicinity who could stop him. The other 3 sacred halls only had one 7th Great Eternal Emperor each. There was nothing to be afraid of. Yixian continued his journey. As long as he destroyed the 3 sacred halls, the 5 elements sword attendants could be activated. Next, Yixian used his superior strength to destroy the Violent Earth Sacred Hall, and then the Origin Gold Sacred Hall. In this way, only the Scarlet Flame Sacred Hall was left. At this time, Yixian was already on his way to the Scarlet Flame Sacred Hall. Previously, he had destroyed 2 sacred halls, which had increased his heaven's will by a lot. He estimated that if he destroyed the most powerful sacred hall, the Scarlet Flame Sacred Hall, he might be able to break through to 5th Great Eternal Emperor. However, things were not as simple as he thought. The Scarlet Flame Sacred Hall had notified an expert after learning about the destruction of the other 4 sacred halls. A few days later, Yixian arrived at the Scarlet Flame Sacred Hall. However, the sacred hall was surrounded. All the experts were lined up neatly, waiting for Yixian's arrival. "Scarlet Flame Sacred Hall Master, come out and meet me," Yixian shouted as soon as he arrived. "Who's there?" The experts of the Scarlet Flame Sacred Hall looked around one after another, but they did not see anyone. At this time, the Sword God's doppelganger suddenly removed the Void Spirit Divine Armor and revealed his true body. Only then did they notice Yixian. "He's here." After seeing Yixian, someone from the Divine Hall of Scarlet Flames immediately reported this matter to their superiors. Of course, even if they didn't report it, the Scarlet Flame Temple Master would have already known. After all, Yixian's words had made his intentions clear. However, due to Yixian's ferocious reputation, these Scarlet Flame Divine Temple's experts did not dare to act rashly. Soon, the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall's Temple Master came out. This was a red-haired old man who possessed the strength of a rank 7 Eternal Emperor. He was the strongest expert in the 5 sacred halls. "Are you the one who destroyed the other 4 divine halls?" The Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master narrowed his eyes and asked. Yixian did not try to hide it. He nodded and said, "That's right. I did it." "How dare you kill a few of my brothers?" said the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall's Palace Master. From the memories of those people, it could be seen that the 5 sacred halls' palace masters used to be disciples of certain forces. Yixian naturally did not forget. He smiled and said, "Only those who are capable will know of the treasure. If you hand over the Scarlet Flame Divine Stone obediently, I can spare your life." Although he said so, he did not think that the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master would compromise so easily. After all, the Scarlet Flame Divine Stone was the most precious treasure of the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall. How could he give it away so easily? "You're really asking for too much." The Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master snorted coldly. "Now you have the 4 attribute divine stones. If you add my Scarlet Flame Divine Stone, you have 5. I'm curious, why do you want to collect the 5 attribute divine stones? You don't need to worry about what I want to do. You just need to hand it over to me. Of course, you can choose not to hand it over. If you do, the consequences will be the same as your other 4 brothers," said Yixian. "You think you can do that?" The Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master was furious. The saint power in his body surged as he raised his hand to attack Yixian. "You're courting death." Yixian's eyes shone brightly. In an instant he disappeared and reappeared behind the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master. Crack! With just one blow, the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master's Eternal Emperor weapon was shattered by Yixian. The Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master turned pale with fright. He was much stronger than the other 4, but Yixian, a 4th Great Eternal Emperor, was actually able to break through his defense in an instant. Wasn't this strength too monstrous? Before he could react, Yixian attacked again and sent him flying. If he was an ordinary 7th grade Eternal Emperor, he would have been killed by Yi Xian. However, the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master was quite capable and survived. However, he would not live for long. Yi Xian was determined to kill him. However, at this moment, stop! Suddenly, an explosive shout entered Yi Xian's ears. He turned his head to look and saw a figure in the air that just happened to attack him. Whoosh! This person's attack was very fast and landed on the Sword God Doppelganger in an instant. The Sword God Doppelganger was hit and sent flying. Fortunately, the Sword God Doppelganger had an invincible body. Otherwise, even a 7th grade Eternal Emperor would have died. So strong. Yi Xian shuddered. He sensed that this person's aura was several times stronger than the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master's. A 8th grade Eternal Emperor. Where did this expert come from? Yi Xian could not figure it out. However, when he saw the newcomer's face, a memory immediately came to him. This person had appeared in the memories of the 4 palace masters before. Furthermore, he had an extraordinary relationship with the 4 of them. This person was the master of the 5 temple masters of the 5 elements temple, Ko Wenhua. This Ko Wenhua is a guardian of the 5 elements temple of a large force. He is an 8th grade Eternal Emperor. The 5 elements temple is an expert who is a half-step sovereign. Yi Xian thought to himself. Before he could react, Ko Wenhua attacked again. He was determined to kill Yi Xian. In this battle, if it were a normal fight, Yi Xian would not be able to kill his opponent no matter what. Even if he had the divine sword technique, he would have to hit his opponent. However, given Yi Xian's temperament, he would not fight one-on-one with his opponent. I'm not fighting alone. Yi Xian's eyes lit up and immediately released Old Tree and the others. However, Old Tree and the others' opponent was not Ko Wenhua, but the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master. His ability to summon out of thin air surprised Ko Wenhua. Immediately, the latter attacked and killed Old Shu and the others. However, the moment he made a move, he gave Yi Xian a chance. At this time, Yi Xian had used the Eye of Assassination and flashed behind the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master. Crack! Another crisp sound was heard. This time, the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master's defenses were all broken. Oh no! Ko Wenhua and the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall Master's expressions changed drastically. However, even if Ko Wenhua was an 8th grade Eternal Emperor, he could not prevent the next scene from happening. Old Tree and the others who had been killed by Ko Wenhua appeared again. Chapter 2067. Boom! Amidst a rumbling sound, the Scarlet Flame Divine Hall's Hall Master was killed. When his corpse fell from the sky, it was absorbed by Yi Xian into the devouring space. At the same time, the Scarlet Blaze Divine Stone in the Scarlet Blaze Shrine Master's hand fell into Yi Xian's hand. Now he had all the 5 elements Divine Stones. Ding! The host can activate the 5 elements swordsman. Do you want to activate them? Yes. Yi Xian immediately responded. Ding! The activation of the 5 elements swordsman is successful. The host's affinity with the 5 elements has reached the upper limit. The system notification sounded. The upper limit of the affinity with the 5 elements was the maximum value. This meant that Yi Xian's attacks with the 5 elements would be significantly more powerful in the future. In addition, he had a damage reduction effect on such attacks. Previously, Yi Xian had increased his fire attack power by using the Immortal Phoenix bloodline and the Immortal Eye Unicorn bloodline. Now he had increased his affinity by 4 more elements. This was very good. Yi Xian immediately released the 5 elements swordsmen. The 5 elements swordsmen were dressed quite handsomely. Beside them floated 5 elemental spheres of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Although they did not attack, Yi Xian could feel their aura. They were more powerful than the immortal swordsmen. Your opponent is him. Go. Yi Xian immediately ordered the 5 elements swordsmen. In an instant, the 5 elements swordsmen charged toward Ko Wenhua. Ko Wenhua was the guardian of the 5 elements path. He cultivated the 5 elements cultivation method. Together with the mandate of heaven, he was very powerful. However, this was child's play for the 5 elements swordsmen. Whoosh! A slash broke through the air and attacked the 5 elements swordsmen. At the same time, the 5 elements swordsmen fiercely slashed with their sword. A sword chi containing the 5 elements broke through the air. Bang! In the air, a shock wave swept out. The two sword chis collided and dissipated together. The five-element swordsman was the same level as Yi Xian. They were both fourth-grade Eternal Emperors. However, their attack was on par with Ko Wenhua's, who was an eighth-grade Eternal Emperor. How was this possible? Ko Wenhua was shocked, and so was Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian knew that the five-element sword attendants were completely immune to five elements attacks, and so were his attacks. That was why the sword attendants of the five elements had been able to disperse the sword chi of the five elements, and then their attacks were on par with the heaven's will. In short, Ko Wenhua's attack was a heavenly fate attack to the five elements sword attendants. If it was another person, the five element sword attendants would be at a disadvantage. This time it was just right. In an instant, the five element sword attendants and Ko Wenhua exchanged blows. Although there was a huge gap between the two of them, their strength was evenly matched. The five-element sword servants are indeed powerful. They are much stronger than the undying sword servants. Yi Xian nodded in satisfaction. However, he couldn't just watch the five-element sword attendants and Ko Wenhua fight one-on-one. Ares' domain. At this moment, he activated another trump card. In the next moment, the entire world seemed to have frozen. Apart from him, there was only one other expert from the Scarlet Flame Temple who could move. Eye of Assassination. Before the expert from the Scarlet Flame Temple could react, Yi Xian had already appeared behind him and slashed with his sword. Rip! In an instant, the sword god's doppelganger killed the expert and received the buff effect of the invincible god of war. Go! As the world returned to normal, Yi Xian led the old tree and the others to attack Ko Wenhua. Even Ko Wenhua had to pay attention to such a situation. Kid, where did you come from? Ko Wenhua finally couldn't help but ask. I'll tell you when you're dead. Yi Xian didn't answer this question because there was no need to. What a big mouth. Ko Wenhua snorted and decided to go all out. However, in the face of all kinds of attacks, he, an eighth-grade Eternal Emperor, seemed to be a little weak. This battle lasted for a full minute. One should know that an expert of this level could do a lot of things in 1 second. For example, he could easily cross 10 billion kilometers of land. Not to mention an Eternal Emperor, even an immortal could easily cross 1,000,000 kilometers of land using the immortal jump. 1 minute was enough for them to exchange blows countless times. However, in this 1 minute, the one who was suppressed was not Yi Xian, but Ko Wenhua. It was really funny. A dignified 8th-grade Eternal Emperor was actually defeated by a group of 4th-grade Eternal Emperors. If news of this spread, Ko Wenhua would lose face. However, what Ko Wenhua didn't know was that Yi Xian hadn't used his full strength yet. Alright, enough fun. It's time for you to accompany your 5 disciples. At this time, Yi Xian's lips suddenly curled up. Just now, he had killed the Scarlet Flame Temple Master and killed the rest of the people. In other words, he had a huge amount of cultivation resources in his hands. After activating the 5-element sword servants, Yi Xian wanted to test the combat power of the 5-element sword servants. Therefore, he had only been playing around. Now he was done playing. Ding! The host has broken through. The host is now a 5th-grade Eternal Emperor. In an instant, the aura of Yi Xian's group skyrocketed. The sword god's doppelganger, Old Tree, Black Horn, Black Gold Sword Servant, Undying Sword Servant, 5-element Sword Servant, and Yi Xian's War God Mount all rose from 4th-grade Eternal Emperors to 5th-grade Eternal Emperors without exception. Their overall strength had increased by more than 10 times. What? Ko Wenhua was shocked. Before the breakthrough, these people had been able to put him under pressure. Now that they had both broken through, how could he fight? Let's go. Ko Wenhua made a prompt decision and immediately turned around to leave. It's too late to leave now. Yi Xian's eyes widened. In the next moment, everyone used their trump cards. A series of attacks pierced through the air. Ko Wenhua shivered and dodged the attacks of Old Shu and Black Horn, but was hit by the 2 sword chis of the 5-element sword servants and the undead sword servants. Ko Wenhua could still block the sword chi of the undying sword servant. At that time, he could not block the attack of the 5-element sword servant at all. After the breakthrough, the invisible sword servant could easily destroy his destiny protection. When the 5-colored sword light entered his body, Ko Wenhua felt the blood in his body surge. In the next moment, Ko Wenhua's body exploded and he died. At that moment, Yi Xian rushed over and collected Ko Wenhua's interspatial ring and destiny. Then, he unceremoniously devoured them. His strength had increased by another step. The disciples of Crimson Flame Divine Hall were dumbfounded. Not only did the Hall Master die, but even the Hall Master's master also died? This was too unreal. Before they could react, the group of low-level Eternal Emperors were all sucked into the devouring space by Old Tree and Black Horn. Since obtaining the Beast God Clock, Yixian had a habit of letting Wei Zhentian search his soul. Chapter 2068. Yixian found quite a few 5-element stones in Ko Wenhua's interspatial ring. He immediately gave them to the 5-element swordsman to strengthen. Ko Wenhua was a guardian of the 5 elements, and the 5 elements were half-step sovereigns. The members of the 5 elements sect all cultivated with the help of 5-element stones. They usually formed groups of 5, and they would complement each other and cultivate together. This way their cultivation speed would be much faster than the average person's. The 5-element sect actually has a 5-element stone mine? Yixian's lips curled up slightly. The 5-element swordsmen were currently his strongest subordinates. If he could continue to strengthen them, it would be excellent. However, the half-step sovereigns of the 5-element sect had to be careful. Ko Wenhua's body exploded and died. Although I collected his body parts, I'm only 80% sure. I wonder if anyone would be able to see through my disguise if I used the true mask. Yixian raised an eyebrow and decided to give it a try. Previously, he had almost always used a 100% disguise. Now that he was going to use an 80% disguise, he didn't know if he would be discovered. An 80% disguise meant that he could only disguise himself as 80% of Ko Wenhua's face, voice, and aura. It would be easy to recognize him. Forget it. It's already good enough that I'm 80% sure. When the time comes, I'll just say that it was caused by cultivation. Yixian didn't think too much and prepared to head to the 5-element sect. Coincidentally, Ko Wenhua had built a teleportation formation near the Crimson Flame Shrine, so Yixian took advantage of it. Yixian used the formation to cross a large distance and arrived near the 5-element sect. It said that the 5-element sect's patriarch has a 5-element spirit root and has an extremely high affinity for the 5 elements. That's why he was able to form 5 Dao seeds when he was just a half-step Dao Lord. He's very powerful. Yixian thought to himself as he approached the 5-element sect's mountain gate. Guardian Ko, you've returned. When he arrived at the 5 elements mountain gate, the disciples at the gate greeted him respectfully. Yixian pretended to be thoughtful. After nodding slightly, he walked in. He searched through Ko Wenhua's memories. Although his memories were incomplete due to the incomplete corpse, it should not be difficult for him to deal with ordinary matters. The 5 elements, as expected of the 5 elements. After entering, Yixian couldn't help but click his tongue, because he felt many auras that were not weaker than Ko Wenhua's. This meant that they were at least rank 8 Eternal Emperors. Apart from that, there were also several elders who were 9th grade Eternal Emperors. With Yixian's current strength, if they were to fight here, it would definitely be a strenuous and unrewarding task. Let's take a look at the 5 elements vein first. Yixian narrowed his eyes slightly. He was now disguised as the guardian of the 5 elements sect, Ko Wenhua. He was qualified to enter the 5 elements mine. The 5 elements veins in the 5 elements sect could produce 5 elements divine stones, but the 5 elements sect patriarch did not allow them to wantonly mine because their cultivation methods could be improved faster if they cultivated in the 5 elements veins. 5 element or veins were extremely rare. If they were to collapse, it would be a huge loss. Once the 5 elements or vein collapsed, the 5 element sect would most likely come to an end. Then it would most likely go downhill. Yixian entered the 5 elements or vein under the guise of Ko Wenhua's guardian. This time, he did not dare to casually mine the 5 elements divine stones because there were formations set up on them. Once someone touched them, an elder would appear. However, Yixian's attention was not on the 5 elements divine stones this time. His target was the 5 elements sect disciples who had entered the 5 elements or vein to cultivate. The most outstanding 5 elements sect disciples is only a rank 7 Eternal Emperor. There is nothing to be afraid of. The corners of Yixian's mouth curled up slightly. He looked at the 5 forks in front of him and randomly chose one to enter. The 5 elements or vein had 5 subveins of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Each subvein had countless mines. Every disciple who entered would choose a mine to cultivate in. Yixian entered the metal mine and sensed it. He found that there was also a small protective formation inside. If he did not enter personally, he would not know who was inside. Yixian randomly chose a mine and entered it. He found a disciple cultivating inside. The Five Elements sect disciple sensed Yixian's arrival. He did not open his eyes, but he was slightly angry. One had to know that the rules of the Five Elements or vein were clearly written on the entrance. As long as there was someone inside, the protective formation would light up and no one else was allowed to enter. However, when the Five Elements sect disciple saw Yixian's face, he swallowed the words that had risen to his throat. Guardian Co. The Five Elements sect disciple hurriedly greeted him. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Yixian suddenly disappeared and reappeared behind him. Rip! With a crisp sound, the disciple's head was directly cut off by Yixian's sword. In an instant, the destiny stone in the disciple's body condensed into an eternal destiny stone. Collect! Without saying a word, Yixian put away the corpse and the remains of the disciple. This scene happened so quickly that the disciple, a fifth-grade eternal emperor, was killed before he could react. In this way no one would notice. After that, Yixian left the first mine and entered the second. He used the same method to kill all the people in the second mine to reap the benefits. In this metal-type mine alone, there were thousands of people cultivating. Moreover, they were all at least third-grade eternal emperors. This was the standard for entering the Five Elements or vein to cultivate. In order to increase efficiency, Yixian decided to release the Old Tree, Black Horn, and the others to assist him. However, Black Horn, Old Tree, and the others were too obvious. They would be easily discovered. Once they were discovered, it would cause a lot of unnecessary trouble. For example, they would attract the attention of the Guardian Elder. The Guardian Elder was a ninth-grade Eternal Emperor expert. He was only one step away from becoming a half-step sovereign. Yixian could fight such an expert. However, he should not forget whose territory he was in. The Five Elements sect. A battle in the most important place of the Five Elements sect would naturally attract the attention of the Five Elements sect's patriarch. When the time came, the half-step sovereign patriarch might personally take action. Therefore, it was better to be careful. Although Yixian's efficiency was low when he acted alone, it was very safe. With the mask of authenticity, even the Five Elements sect's patriarch would not be able to recognize him if he stood in front of him. In the following time, Yixian hunted the disciples of the Five Elements sect in the metal-type mine. Chapter 2069. Then, Yixian left the metal-type mine and entered the wood-type mine. Using the same method, he killed many disciples. These disciples were very unlucky. They were cultivating well when they were killed. They died with grievances. However, Yixian promised in his heart that he would resurrect them one day and give them heavenly treasures. This kind of thing was child's play for Yixian. Not to mention breaking through to a higher realm, just his current strength of a fifth-grade Eternal Emperor was enough to resurrect a third-grade Eternal Emperor. However, this would damage his destiny. If he became a sixth-grade Eternal Emperor, it would not be much of a problem. At this time, Yixian had already wandered into the fourth fire-type mine. He sensed that his destiny had reached a bottleneck. As long as he killed the people in the fire-type mine, he could break through to become a sixth-grade Eternal Emperor. At that time, no one in the Tao of Five Elements would be a match for him except for the half-step sovereign old ancestor. His current strength had at least doubled compared to when he first entered the Tao of Five Elements mine. After all, these disciples had some Five Elements sacred stones. Although they were inferior to the Five Elements sacred stones, they were superior in quantity. Therefore, the Five Elements sword attendants had also improved a lot. Soon Yixian had almost finished off the people in the fire-type mine. Yes, this time he did not have any scruples. After all, he was about to break through and could not hold back. After he killed an elite disciple of the 7th grade Eternal Emperor level, he heard a system notification sound. Ding! The host has broken through and is now a 6th grade Eternal Emperor. Hearing this, Yixian's eyes flashed and the corners of his mouth could not help but curl up slightly. Finally, he had broken through. Now, which Eternal Emperor in the Tao of Five Elements could stop him? Since this was the case, he did not need to keep a low profile anymore. He directly released Old Tree and the others. In fact, There was a heavily guarded passageway in each of the 5 elemental mines in the Tao of 5 Elements mine. There was a protector overseeing each passageway. Yi Xian knew that these 5 passageways led to the depths of the Tao of 5 Elements mine. That was the forbidden area of the Tao of 5 Elements. Even the protectors could not enter. At the same time, it was also the destination of Yi Xian. Immediately, he walked towards the entrance. Protector Ko? One of the guardians at the entrance recognized Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian did not waste any time. He immediately used Death Hunt Command and Assassin's Eye to attack the enemy from behind. Hiss! A crisp sound rang out, and the protector died instantly. What a joke! Even a 9th grade Eternal Emperor Elder was not worth mentioning in front of Yi Xian, let alone a mere 8th grade Eternal Emperor Protector. Each of these 5 paths is guarded by a protector, and it is said that there are 2 elders in the depths. Yi Xian thought to himself. He had learned this from Ko Wenhua's memories. 2 elders were equivalent to 2 9th grade Eternal Emperors. This was not a small number. But in front of Yi Xian it was nothing. Without another word, Yi Xian walked into the passageway. Not long after, he sensed 2 powerful auras. Who is it? Before Yi Xian could walk out of the passageway, an old voice sounded from inside. Elder, I have something to report. Yi Xian said immediately. Come in. The people inside recognized Ko Wenhua's voice. Yi Xian continued to walk. When he walked out of the passageway, he saw 2 old men in the 5 Elements sect elder robes sitting cross-legged in the middle. Behind them was a simple and unadorned door. That door should be the secret of the formation of the 5 Elements vein. Protector Ko, I remember that you are not the one guarding the passageway today. Why are you here? A black-robed elder asked. Because I am here to kill you. Yi Xian was impatient. Before he finished speaking, he had already flashed behind the other party. Crack! The Eternal Emperor weapon on the black-robed elder shattered into pieces. Yi Xian's attack had broken through his defense. The next attack would be enough to take his life. What? The black-robed elder and the other white-robed elder were shocked. Ko Wenhua was only an 8th grade Eternal Emperor. Although the black-robed elder was not the strongest among the Eternal Emperors, he was still a mid-grade 9th grade Eternal Emperor. How did he do it? You disgraceful bastard! Seeing this, the white-robed elder immediately tried to capture Ko Wenhua. But in the next moment, several figures appeared in front of Yi Xian and covered his body. The white-robed elder's attack was blocked by the invisible swordsman after killing the old tree and black horn. At the same time, Yi Xian took advantage of this gap and flashed behind the other party. Crack! The white-robed elder was once again caught off guard and was sent flying. Quick, inform the ancestor. The white-robed elder spat out a mouthful of blood and shouted angrily. Unfortunately, the black-robed elder did not reply. The white-robed elder's face was gloomy. He squinted and found that the black-robed elder, whose defense had been broken by Yi Xian, had his heart pierced by a golden saber-toothed tiger and died. One of the 2 9th grade Eternal Emperors died in an instant and the other was seriously injured. It's over. The white-robed elder seemed to have seen the end of the world. Yi Xian had the strength to kill the black-robed elder. Naturally, he also had the ability to kill him. He was afraid that he would not survive the next moment. Sure enough, without waiting for him to stop, Yi Xian and the others launched a fierce attack on him. Boom! The group of people attacked together and killed the 9th grade Eternal Emperor white-robed elder. Then Yi Xian quickly put away the 2 corpses and moved quickly to the quaint door. Although the battle just now did not last long, the 2 elders might have already sent a voice transmission to the 5 Elements sect ancestor. Therefore, Yi Xian had to get the treasure as soon as possible. After Yi Xian observed for a while, he found that this formation was not ordinary. It should have been set up by the 5 Elements sect ancestor himself. This can't stop me. Yi Xian smiled confidently and joined forces with the others to attack. However, these attacks dissipated as soon as they landed on the defensive formation. Moreover, there was not even a sound. This made Yi Xian feel a little strange. What's going on? Why is there a soundproof formation? Yi Xian was puzzled. Instead of setting up a soundproof formation, it would have been better to set up a defensive formation. However, he did not care so much and continued to attack. However, this defensive formation was very powerful. With his current strength, he could not break it. Damn, a half-step ruler is so powerful. Yi Xian could not help but sigh. Half-step sovereign realm was a whole new realm. There was a huge gap between an eternal emperor and a half-step ruler. The former would not be able to withstand a single blow from the latter. A formation set up by such an expert was not something that an eternal emperor could break. Chapter 2070. Since that's the case, I have no choice but to use my trump card. Let's take the things and leave. Yi Xian's eyes flickered. He had already decided to use his trump card. If he could obtain the treasure that formed the 5 elements vein, he could plant it in the devouring space. This way, the 5 elements sword attendants could be continuously strengthened. Divine sword technique. Without hesitation, Yi Xian slashed at the quaint door. With this move, the entire 5 elements mineral vein was split open. The quaint door and the defensive formation were broken together. Boom! The stone at the door shattered and fell heavily to the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. As the formation was broken, Yi Xian's perception could penetrate it. However, when he sensed it, he was frightened. There was an extremely powerful aura inside. A 9th grade Eternal Emperor? No. This aura was dozens of times stronger than a 9th grade Eternal Emperor. The 5 elements sect's great ancestor? Yi Xian almost fainted. He did not expect that the 5 elements sect's great ancestor, whom he feared, was actually in seclusion inside. Although the smoke and dust filled the air, Yi Xian had the eye of things. He saw a figure sitting cross-legged inside. It must be the 5 elements sect's great ancestor. The most ridiculous thing was that Yi Xian's attack just now had landed only half a meter away from the 5 elements sect's great ancestor. If the distance had been slightly off, perhaps the divine sword art just now would have been enough to kill this half-step sovereign expert. What the F***ck? Yi Xian cursed in his heart. At this time, the 5 elements sect's great ancestor reacted. He waved his right hand and quickly put away the 2 things beside him. These 2 things were his secrets. Who is it? An old voice fell into Yi Xian's ears. His expression was very interesting at this time. It was as if he was in the middle of carrying on the ancestral line when Yi Xian barged in. He was a little flustered. However, Yi Xian did not respond. He frowned and was thinking. The 2 things that were put away by the 5 elements sect's great ancestor must be the secret of the 5 elements vein. If he had known, he would have flashed over and put away the things. What a loss, what a loss. Who are you? How did you break in? The 5 elements sect's great ancestor asked again. How strange. There should be 2 elders guarding the door. Why aren't they here? However, after he thought about it carefully, he discovered that he had some impression of the person before him. He was actually a protector of his 5 elements path. Because Yi Xian's disguise was only 80% effective and the 5 elements ancestor was extremely mysterious, even a protector might not be able to meet him. Therefore, the 5 elements ancestor didn't recognize Ko Wenhua's face in time. Ancestor, I've come this time to ask you for 2 things, Yi Xian said. The 5 elements patriarch subconsciously asked after hearing this. The 5 elements great ancestor was furious. Although he didn't know how Yi Xian came in, nor did he know where the 2 elders went. In short, this matter was a secret of the 5 elements Tao. Only elders would know about it. Now that Yi Xian knew, he could not let him live. The 5 elements great ancestor immediately charged out. Boom! 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 A series of explosions rang out. Yi Xian's people were all killed in 1 second, except for the sword god's clone. So strong. As expected of a half-step sovereign expert, Yi Xian could not help but exclaim in his heart. A half-step sovereign expert had fused the Tao fruit and the 99 fate into their Tao heart. The 5 elements great ancestor already had a Tao heart, so his strength was extraordinary. Fortunately, the sword god's clone was invincible. Even if he was beaten for 10,000 years, he would not die. However, Yi Xian was a little hesitant. With his current combat strength, he could not fight the 5 elements great ancestor, not even the 5 elements sword servants. So should he leave or stay? I won't leave first. Let's destroy the 5 elements sect first. Yi Xian's eyes flashed. This time he decided to use his true body. The sword god's clone delayed the five elements' great ancestor, while his true body descended personally. With his strength, no one could stop him except the five elements' great ancestor. As long as he killed the rest of the five elements sect, he might be able to break through to become a rank 7 eternal emperor. At this time, Yi Xian's face suddenly changed and returned to his original appearance. This was because he had already put away Wei Zhentian, who had turned into the mask of authenticity. As for his true body, he had already descended to the five elements sect and put on the void spirit divine armor. To be safe, he even summoned the black gold divine armor. The five elements' great ancestor was a half-step sovereign. Even if he did not use energy attacks, he might be able to kill him with just his fists. Thus it was better to be careful. Rumble. Deafening sounds kept coming from the five elements' mine. However, at this time the five elements' great ancestor, who was wondering why he could not kill Yi Xian, felt something. What did you do? The five elements' great ancestor could not help but ask. Nothing. I'm just killing your elders. The sword god's clone grinned. The five elements' great ancestor's expression changed, but he did not leave this place and continued to attack Yi Xian. His attacks were very sharp. If Yi Xian's true body was here, even with the black gold divine armor and the void spirit divine armor, he would be in danger of dying. However, when the five elements' great ancestor attacked, Yi Xian's aura suddenly rose by a large margin. Although he did not break through, his heavenly fate level had indeed increased. This was because his true body had killed the other elders of the five elements sect and absorbed all their heavenly fates. In addition, there were the protectors and mid-level eternal emperor disciples. After dealing with them, Yi Xian's true body charged into the five elements mine and began to wantonly mine the five elements divine stone. The five elements divine stone could not only be used to strengthen the five elements sword servants, but it could also be used to forge weapons. As long as the divine sword art's cooldown was restored, Yi Xian would be able to pose a threat to the five elements' great ancestor. Bastard! How dare you destroy my five elements sect? The five elements' great ancestor suddenly sensed something and could not help but roar. So what? You can resurrect them anyway, isn't that right? Yi Xian said. You're courting death. The five elements' great ancestor was furious. He did not care about anything else and attacked Yi Xian with all his might. However, after attacking for a long time, Yi Xian was not injured at all. It was too strange. On the other side, Yi Xian's true body and the others had already begun to wantonly collect the five elements divine stone. However, this was not a problem for the five elements great ancestor because he had a five elements divine stone. As long as the five elements divine stone was still there, the five elements great ancestor would not be considered destroyed. As for the others with his realm, he could easily resurrect even a seventh grade eternal emperor. Chapter 2071. Who exactly are you? How can a mere rank 6 eternal emperor withstand so many of my attacks without being injured? The five elements sect's old ancestor couldn't help but ask. If you want to know, give me something in exchange? Yi Xian smirked. This answer infuriated the five elements sect's old ancestor, and he charged toward Yi Xian. After that, the sword god's avatar was in a passive state. No, it should be said that from the beginning until now, he had been beaten up. However, his tough and indestructible body was capable of withstanding all of the five elements sect's old ancestors' attacks. On the other side, his original body, the old tree, and the others had already emptied the five elements mineral vein, leaving nothing behind. The battle prowess of the five elements sword attendants soared. However, the five elements sword attendants had just been killed by the five elements sect's great ancestor, so there was a cooldown period. He could not summon them again today. Right now, I'm just a rank 6 eternal emperor. Apart from the divine sword technique, I don't pose a threat to this old man at all. I'd better level up first. Yi Xian thought to himself. Then, he left the five paths and headed for a nearby power. Nearby, there were several factions on the same level as the five elements ancestor. Their strongest experts were half-step sovereigns, but they were slightly weaker than the five elements ancestor. Yi Xian wanted to use them to increase his strength. Because Yi Xian had gone too far, the five elements Tao Patriarch beat Yi Xian for 3 days and 3 nights. In the past 3 days and 3 nights, the sword god's avatar had endured countless attacks. Even a rank 2 half-step dominator would most likely die under such attacks from the 5 elements Tao ancestor. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the strength of the 5 elements Tao ancestor was. Brat, what are you made of? You've taken so many of my attacks, yet you're completely unscathed? On the 4th day, the 5 elements grand ancestor asked once more. However, perhaps Yixian was numb from the beating, or perhaps he was too lazy to reply because his heart was still with the main body. However, at this moment the 5 elements sex great ancestor suddenly stopped, which surprised Yixian. What's wrong? Tired? The sword god's doppelganger smirked. You destroyed my 5 elements, but I can't kill you. What do you think I should do? The 5 elements old ancestor asked helplessly. In this world, the cruelest thing was that you couldn't kill your enemy even though they were right in front of you. It was really too tragic. Don't worry. You'll know what to do in a moment. Yixian's lips curled up slightly. At this moment, his heaven's mandate had increased quite a bit compared to 3 days ago. In these 3 days he visited 2 forces of the same level as the 5 elements and fiddled with them. At this moment he was about to break through. Patriarch 5 elements was a little surprised, but not long after he felt the change in Yixian's aura. Ding! Host has made a breakthrough. Host is now a rank 7 Eternal Emperor. A system notification sounded in Yixian's mind. He had finally broken through. Did that mean that Yixian now possessed the ability to fight the Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch? Old man, let's fight again. At this moment, Yixian's eyes flickered and he suddenly summoned the old tree and the others. Of course, the old tree and the others were no threat to the Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch. This time Yixian's trump card was the 5 Elements Swordsman. Humph! The Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch snorted and instantly killed the old tree and the others. However, when his attack landed on the 5 Elements Sword attendants, it did not immediately kill them. Instead, it was blocked by them. What? The Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch was shocked. Yixian was one thing, but now there was another freak? He felt it and found that the 5 Elements Swordsman had neutralized his 5 Elements attack. Then, his Heaven's Mandate attack broke the 5 Elements defense of the 5 Elements Swordsman. After it was weakened, it landed on the 5 Elements Swordsman. Good guy. The Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch could not help but sigh in his heart. At this moment, the 5 Elements Swordsman, who had been sent flying, suddenly slashed with their sword and charged at the Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch. Child's play. The Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch snorted and raised his hand to block. However, to his surprise, the 5 Elements Swordsman's attack broke his 5 Elements defense. What blocked the attack was the Heaven's Mandate defense. Fortunately, he was no longer an Eternal Emperor, but a half-step ruler. He immediately attacked with all his strength. Although Yixian had broken through to become a rank 7 Eternal Emperor, there was a huge gap between an Eternal Emperor and a half-step ruler. If Yixian was a rank 9 Eternal Emperor, he might be able to fight him. However, he was only a rank 7 Eternal Emperor. Sure enough, the 5 Elements Sword attendants suffered the same fate. Just like that day, they were killed by the 5 Elements Tao ancestor. Kid, what other tricks do you have? The Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch looked at Yixian with his old eyes. I can't do anything to you for the time being, but I'm not worried. At most, I'll be able to deal with you in a month. Yixian said slowly. A month? The Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch almost laughed out loud. He was a half-step ruler, and he had already forgotten how many years he had been cultivating since he was born. Now, Yixian was saying that he would be able to deal with him in a month. How laughable. Kid, you're very strong. Why don't we make a deal? The Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch said. I wiped out your sect, and you still want to make a deal with me? Yixian was stunned. The Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch said. Didn't you kill so many people to obtain natural treasures to cultivate? I know a place with good things. Why don't we work together and split the harvest equally? How about it? What good things? Yixian was attracted by the Tao of 5 Elements Patriarch. If a half-step ruler wanted something, it had to be something good. Just now you saw my secret, so I might as well tell you. I have a 5-colored divine stone in my hand. It's a treasure I obtained in my early years, but it can't continuously produce 5-colored divine stones. The 5-colored divine stone isn't the most important thing in my 5-colored divine stone, but something else. the Tao of Five Elements patriarch said. It's not? Yixian was stunned. If the five-colored divine stone wasn't the most important thing in the five-colored divine stone, then what was it? It's a drop of pseudo-divine blood, the Tao of Five Elements patriarch said. This pseudo-divine blood contains a huge amount of energy. It's what allows the five-colored divine stone to continuously function. That's why my five-colored divine stone isn't exhausted. Instead, it's growing. Pseudo-divine blood. After hearing this name, Yixian was a little surprised. He had finally come into contact with his god, even if it was only a pseudo-god. And then, Yixian narrowed his eyes. The Tao of Five Elements patriarch glanced at Yixian. He wanted to take out the five-colored divine stone and the pseudo-divine blood, but he thought of Yixian's methods. If something went wrong, it would be troublesome. This pseudo-divine blood is the key to breaking through to half-step ruler realm. In my early years, I obtained a few drops of pseudo-divine blood in a dangerous place in the seventh layer heaven. However, after so many years, I've refined only this one drop, said the Tao of Five Elements patriarch. Hearing this, Yixian understood. Chapter 2072. The cooperation you speak of is for me to enter that danger zone and obtain the pseudo-divine blood? Yixian raised an eyebrow. That's right. The Five Elements ancestor nodded. Even I can't injure you. If we work together, we might be able to reap some benefits. That's not a bad idea, but I don't understand your realm at all, said Yixian. The Tao ancestor of the Five Elements Tao sect paused for a moment before he slowly said, a peak 9th grade Eternal Emperor already possesses a 99 fate. As long as you integrate this 99 fate into your Tao fruit, you can condense it into a Tao heart and become a half-step ruler. However, you're only a first-rank half-step sovereign. If you want to become a second-rank half-step sovereign, you need pseudo-divine blood. From first-rank half-step sovereign to second-rank half-step sovereign, you need to refine 11 drops of pseudo-divine blood. From second-rank half-step sovereign to third-rank half-step sovereign, you need to refine 11 more drops of pseudo-divine blood. So on and so forth. A peak 9th rank half-step sovereign needs to refine 99 drops of pseudo-divine blood. If you can refine the 100th drop of pseudo-divine blood, you'll reach the sovereign realm. To reach the peak of the sovereign realm, you need to refine 999 drops of pseudo-divine blood. After refining the 1000th drop of pseudo-divine blood, you'll reach the undying sovereign realm. To reach the peak of the undying sovereign realm, you need to refine 9,999 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Refining pseudo-divine blood is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even I have only refined 5 drops, so I'm only a mid-first rank half-step sovereign. Yixian nodded slightly after listening to the Five Elements ancestors' explanation. In the half-step sovereign realm, every level required 11 drops of pseudo-divine blood. In the sovereign realm, every level required 111 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Reaching the undying sovereign realm was even more terrifying. Every level required 1,111 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Refining the pseudo-divine blood would definitely become more and more difficult. Even the Five Elements' great ancestor had only refined the first 5 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Then what's after the undying sovereign realm? Asked Yixian. Only the undying sovereigns who have refined 9,999 drops of pseudo-divinity blood can fuse pseudo-divinity blood with their Tao heart and form godhood. The great ancestor of the Tao of Five Elements replied, that dangerous place should be the place where a false god died, so there is a large amount of false god's blood. However, it is also very dangerous inside. Back then, I was only wandering around the periphery, but I almost died. What dangers are there? Yixian asked. In fact, he already had the intention to cooperate, but before he went, it was better to ask first. That place is a huge blood-red forest. The plants inside will attack intruders. That's not the point. The point is that there is a kind of creature in there, which we call the divine blood demon. The Five Elements' grand ancestor said, this divine blood demon is said to have mutated from the blood of a false god. Its combat power is extraordinary. The power of the divine blood demon changed according to the amount of pseudo-god blood in his body. The more pseudo-god blood he had, the stronger he would be. Even I can only fight an ordinary sacred blood demon. If I encounter a sacred blood demon formed from 6 drops of pseudo-god blood, I'm afraid I'll be in danger of dying. That's not bad. Killing one can get a lot of pseudo-god blood, Yixian said. It's not that easy. Once the sacred blood demon dies, it will disappear from the world. You have to extract the pseudo-god blood as soon as possible. The great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements shook his head. The corpse of this sacred blood demon dissipates very quickly. Even I can only extract 1 drop at a time. Only the extracted pseudo-god blood can be stored in the yin and yang ring. I see. Yixian nodded slightly. However, he had the god-level devouring system. If he encountered a sacred blood demon corpse, his extraction speed should be faster than the great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements. The pseudo-god blood of this sacred blood demon that has not been extracted will return to the center of the blood-red forest. It is said that there is a terrifyingly powerful sacred blood demon king there, but no one knows what realm it is. At the mention of the sacred blood demon king, the great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements couldn't help but shudder. With his strength, he could at most fight to a draw with a mid-first stage sacred blood demon formed from 5 drops of pseudo-god blood. Then how do you want to work together? Yixian asked curiously. You and I will work together and enter the blood-red forest together. You will be the scout, said the great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements. The sword god's clone's defense was the strongest he had ever seen. He couldn't break through it after 3 days and 3 nights, so it should be enough to enter the blood-red forest. Oh, we can try, but before that I need a few things, Yixian said. What things? The great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements asked. A large amount of eternal fate stones, 5 elements god stones, and various eternal emperor artifacts. Yixian replied. You destroyed my sect and still want something from me? The great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements was stunned. In that case, forget it. Yixian shrugged. Don't think that you can keep me here just because you're a half-step ruler. If I want to leave, even a ruler won't be able to stop me. You. Seeing how confident Yixian was, the great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements swallowed his words and said, If you and I work together, we will definitely reap unexpected benefits. Fine. With that, he began to take out items from his yin and yang ring. These items were all for Yixian. It had to be said that the great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements was extremely wealthy. Even if Yixian added up all the items he had obtained in the past few days, it probably wouldn't be enough. Yixian put the items into his devouring space and said, Very good. We can move now. The 5 elemental sect's patriarch had given him the eternal fate stone alone, which was probably enough for him to break through to become a rank 8 eternal emperor lord. However, Yixian didn't immediately break through. During the 3 days the sword god's clone had been beaten up. His main body had plundered several factions and the divine sword art had already been restored. Yixian's plan was to use the divine sword art once when he reached the 7th rank eternal emperor realm. Then, he would use the eternal emperor weapon given by the Tao of 5 elements to recover its cooldown before breaking through. This way he could use the divine sword art one more time. If he immediately broke through to the 8th rank eternal emperor realm, the items given by the great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements might not be able to recover its cooldown. After going through so many things, Yixian had become more and more experienced. Alright, let's go. The great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements nodded immediately after hearing Yixian's words. Then, he rushed out of the ruins of the Tao of 5 elements. The sect was nothing to the great ancestor of the Tao of 5 elements. He had already handed over all the affairs to the elders. As long as he broke through, the dead could all be revived. Chapter 2073. A few days later, the 5 elements sect's ancestor brought the sword god clone to a teleportation array. This teleportation array can teleport you to the outskirts of the 7th heaven blood forest. The 5 elements sect's ancestor activated the teleportation array. The Scarlet Forest had been a dangerous place for some time, so the experts in the surroundings were familiar with it. That was why they built a transmission array. Whoosh! After a while, the sword god clone and the 5 elements sect's ancestor landed. Before they left the teleportation palace, they smelled blood. The two walked out. In front of them was a boundless blood forest. This is the blood forest. The 5 elements sect's ancestor said. Yes, it looks dangerous. Yixian nodded. However, the more dangerous a place was, the more treasures there were. Next you will enter. If you encounter a divine blood demon, inform me immediately. We will avoid the strong ones and I will deal with the weak ones. We will split the loot equally. The 5 Elements sect's ancestor said. Okay. Yixian nodded and let the sword god clone enter. The divine blood demons inside were at least half-step dominator level. With his current strength he might not be able to fight them. Therefore Yixian could use the 5 Elements sect's ancestor to obtain some pseudo-god blood. At this time, Yixian had already entered the blood forest. According to the 5 Elements sect's ancestor, this blood forest was the place where a pseudo-god had fallen. Therefore, the surrounding plants had mutated and would attack intruders. As expected, the sword god clone had just entered when it was attacked by these blood-colored plants. However, these blood-colored plants were too weak compared to the divine blood demons. Just the sword god clone alone could deal with a large area. The 5 Elements sword servants were the nemesis of these blood-colored plants, burning an entire area. In the beginning, Yixian did not encounter anything, so he let the old tree, Black Horn, and the others out to explore. The 5 Elements sect's ancestor followed behind Yixian and acted according to Yixian's instructions. Just like that, 3 days passed. In the first 3 days, they were only at the edge of the Scarlet Forest. From now on, they might encounter sacred blood demons. In fact, Yixian wanted to meet the sacred blood demon king the most, because he had a trump card that was enough to kill a sacred blood demon king. Both the divine blood demons and the divine blood demon king were mutated from the blood of a false god. According to the great ancestor of the 5 Elements, the divine blood demons did not have intelligence and fought with brute force. Therefore, if Yixian encountered a divine blood demon king, he might be able to kill him instantly with the divine sword spell. However, with Yixian's current level, he might not even have a chance to attack before he was beaten up like a sandbag by the sacred blood demon king. Right at this moment, "Young master here," Old Tree suddenly shouted. In the next moment, Yixian tore through the void and arrived beside the old tree. When Yixian landed, he saw a corpse in front of him. The head of the corpse had been cut off by a sharp weapon. It was already dead. However, the interspatial ring on its body was not taken away. It seemed that it was killed by a sacred blood demon. Hey, this corpse is still warm. It hasn't been long since it died. Yixian raised an eyebrow. This meant that the sacred blood demon was nearby. Whatever, let's collect it first. Yixian was shocked just now, so he forgot about the important thing, which was to collect the corpse. But in the next moment he frowned. Ding! Unable to collect. The system suddenly notified him. Unable to collect? What was going on? Yixian was a little confused. If it was an item that could not be collected, it would make sense. After all, there was the forbidden array. However, it was very rare for a corpse to be unable to be collected. Since the corpse could not be collected into the Devour space, Yixian would not collect it. He would only collect the interspatial ring. However, the interspatial ring was on this corpse, so Yixian had to take it off. However, when he got closer, whoosh! Suddenly, a large amount of blood gushed out of the corpse. Then it instantly condensed into a form and charged toward Yixian. What? Yixian was very surprised. Before he could react, the bloody figure was in front of him. It extended a scythe and slashed at the neck of the sword god clone. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sword god clone was sent flying. Fortunately, he had an invincible body. Otherwise, even a half-step dominator would have died on the spot. Now Yixian finally understood what this thing was. It turned out to be the sacred blood demon that the 5 Elements sect patriarch had mentioned. Old man, why didn't you say that sacred blood demons can possess corpses? Yixian hurriedly transmitted his voice. What? I didn't know that. The 5 Elements sect patriarch replied in shock. He had come in alone before, and had only encountered sacred blood demons alone. He had not encountered any corpses. However, it was only recently that sacred blood demons could possess corpses. At this time, the sword god clone, who had been sent flying, saw that the sacred blood demon had 3 drops of blood. This meant that it was only an early first-rank sacred blood demon. Ding! Flame Devouring Unicorn has died. As the sword god clone was sent flying, the old tree was killed by the mantis-like sacred blood demon. Next, the sacred blood demon charged at Yixian. Tisk tisk. Yixian's lips curled. He released the old tree again to collect the corpse. This corpse was also a half-step dominator when it was alive. A half-step dominator had already fused their 99 fates with their Tao fruits to form a Tao heart. Thus, they did not have an eternal fate stone in their body. However, as a half-step dominator, how could they not have an eternal fate stone in their ring? Yixian immediately devoured the eternal fate stone. Although he did not break through, he did improve by quite a bit. However, he was still no match for this sacred blood demon. Sacred blood demons were also divided by strength. 1 drop of pseudo-divine blood was the weakest, followed by 2 drops, then 3 drops. The divine blood demon in front of Yixian was a divine blood demon formed from 3 drops of fake divine blood. Its strength was extraordinary. While the sword god clone was being beaten up, the 5 elements patriarch finally arrived. He attacked with all his strength and fought the sacred blood demon. However, this battle was a bit different from what Yixian had expected. Old man, didn't you say sacred blood demons couldn't dodge? Yixian couldn't help but ask. Bastard, these sacred blood demons must be gaining intelligence, roared the 5 elements patriarch. The sacred blood demons he'd encountered before were indeed clumsy and unable to dodge. However, today he'd encountered a sacred blood demon that was like a wild beast. This meant that sacred blood demons were harder to deal with than before. Fortunately, the 5 elements patriarch had already refined 5 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Together with the power of the 5 elements, he was stronger. Chapter 2074. As the divine blood demon was destroyed, the 3 drops of fake divine blood in its body also appeared. Seeing this, the patriarch of the 5 elements quickly wrapped 1 drop with his saint power. Yixian was also prepared. When the divine blood demon died, he quickly came over and collected it. Ding! Unable to collect. Unfortunately, the other 2 drops of fake divine blood could not be collected. Before the system's notification ended, they turned into a cloud of blood mist and flew north. Yixian originally wanted to use the devouring system to refine the fake divine blood, but now it seemed that it would not work. If he wanted to refine the fake divine blood, he would have to wrap it with his saint power like the patriarch of the 5 elements had done to prevent it from dissipating. However, Yixian was only a level 7 eternal emperor and could not do that for the time being. At this time, the patriarch of the 5 elements was refining the fake divine blood. Looking at his back, Yixian could not help but have a thought. This old guy is refining the fake divine blood. If I use the divine sword technique now, I might be able to kill him. Yixian thought to himself. However, the patriarch of the 5 elements was quite strong and could defeat the divine blood demon. If he used the divine sword technique to kill him, he would have 1 less fighter and 1 less cooldown time for the divine sword technique. Of course, if the sneak attack failed, this cooperation might be over. After thinking about it, Yixian decided to take a look first. More than an hour later. Phew! Finally done. The patriarch of the 5 elements breathed a sigh of relief and put the drop of fake divine blood into his interspatial ring. In fact, while refining the fake divine blood, he was also vigilant of his surroundings. This was because they were in the Scarlet Forest. If another divine blood demon appeared, it would be very dangerous. At that time, this drop of fake divine blood would dissipate between heaven and earth like the previous 2 drops. Old guy, it was a pleasure to work with you for the first time. However, shouldn't you give me this drop of fake divine blood as a token of appreciation? Yixian narrowed his eyes and said, Humph! Although you found the divine blood demon without me, do you think you can kill it? Moreover, this drop of divine blood demon was refined by me, so it should be given to me first. The 5 elements sect's great ancestor coldly snorted. Hearing this, the corners of Yixian's mouth curled up slightly. He shrugged and said, If that's the case, I'll give you this drop of pseudo-divine blood. At the same time, our cooperation ends here. You, Patriarch 5 Elements, was shocked. He did not expect Yixian to threaten him with this matter. Don't push your luck. I'm someone who has entered the Scarlet Forest. Even without you, I can still obtain the pseudo-divine blood, said the 5 Elements sect's old ancestor. What a joke. The value of a single drop of pseudo-divine blood was something that even the entire Tao of 5 elements could not compare to. How was it possible for him to give the pseudo-god blood to Yixian? Since that's the case, I'll take my leave. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he broke through the void and prepared to leave. If the first cooperation was not pleasant, then there was no need for cooperation. What if the 5 stars Grand Ancestor refined another drop and still refused to give it to him? If that was the case, it would be better for him to leave as soon as possible so that he would not draw his sword and kill the Grand Ancestor in a fit of anger. Patriarch 5 Elements Sex Old Ancestor was stunned when he saw that Yi Xian really intended to leave. After thinking quickly in his heart for a moment, he shouted, "Wait! What's wrong?" Yi Xian turned around and said, "Boy, the pseudo-divine blood is good stuff. Don't lose it." Patriarch 5 Elements Sex Old Ancestor finally decided to compromise and threw a drop of pseudo-divine blood to Yi Xian. However, this drop of pseudo-divine blood was not the same one that had just been refined. The 5 Elements Sex Old Ancestor had obtained this drop many years ago and used the 5 Elements stone to open up the 5 Elements vein. Therefore, the energy contained in this drop was much less than the one that had just been refined. Yi Xian also noticed this, but he did not say anything and just kept the drop of pseudo-divine blood. "Happy cooperation," Yi Xian said with a smile. In fact, he was not playing hard to get just now. He really wanted to leave. If he left, he could just go back and level up. As long as he broke through to the 9th grade Eternal Emperor realm, he might be able to establish a foothold in the Scarlet Forest. However, it was best that the 5 Elements Sex Old Ancestor could compromise because it would save him a lot of time. Ding! The host has devoured a drop of pseudo-divine blood. Yi Xian did not hesitate and devoured the drop of pseudo-divine blood. Yes, he devoured it. This drop of pseudo-divine blood was devoured by the divine devouring system and turned into a large number of divine devouring crystals. Only after condensing a Tao heart and breaking through to the half-step sovereign realm could one use the pseudo-divine blood to break through to the 1st grade half-step sovereign realm. Therefore, this drop of fake divine blood was of no use to Yi Xian's cultivation. However, after he exchanged it for divine devouring crystals, he could do a lot of things. "I didn't expect to have so many divine devouring crystals. This is great." Yi Xian was overjoyed. There were many things that could be exchanged for in the divine devouring system, such as divine pills and miraculous medicines. However, these were not very useful to Yi Xian at the moment. Therefore, Yi Xian exchanged all the divine devouring crystals for 5 Elements divine stones and used them to strengthen the 5 Elements swordsman. Ding! The 5 Elements swordsmen have been successfully strengthened. A system notification sounded in Yi Xian's mind. The 5 Elements swordsmen were currently Yi Xian's strongest swordsmen. After being strengthened, their strength had increased by more than 3 times. After all, that was a drop of pseudo-divine blood. Yi Xian immediately asked the 5 Elements swordsmen to spar with Old Tree and the others in the devouring system. In the end, the 5 Elements swordsmen easily killed Old Tree, Black Horn, and the undead swordsman. Even with the help of the Black Gold swordsman, the result was the same. Strong, they were simply too strong. If I can get a few more drops of pseudo-divine blood, my strength might be close to that of the 5 Elements Sex Old Ancestor. Then I won't need to cooperate with him. Yi Xian thought to himself. Then, he separated from the 5 Elements Sex Old Ancestor and continued to explore. He kept all the corpses he encountered in the devouring system. These were all half-step sovereigns' corpses. However, these corpses' cultivation levels were not high, and there was no divine blood in their interspatial rings. On the 7th day, Yi Xian encountered another strange corpse. Without another word, Yi Xian went up to probe. As expected, there was a divine blood Yao hiding in the corpse. Bang! The sword god's clone was sent flying, but at the same time, he released the Old Tree, who happened to be right next to the corpse. Keep! The corpse was kept in the Old Tree's devouring system. Hey, there's a drop of pseudo-divine blood? What a haul! At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes suddenly lit up. Not only did he obtain the Eternal Destiny Stone, but he also obtained a drop of pseudo-divine blood. Awesome! He immediately devoured the drop of pseudo-divine blood and exchanged it for 5 Elements divine stones to strengthen the 5 Elements divine servants. Chapter 2075. Sacred Blood Demon? I don't believe I can't kill you. Yi Xian's eyes flashed as he turned Megatron into the Beast God Bell. As soon as the Beast God Bell appeared, Sacred Blood Demon's strength decreased by 80%. Sacred Blood Demon was not human, so the sword god's constitution was useless against him. However, this was a good thing for Yi Xian. After all, the beast god Bell could suppress 80% of his strength. In an instant, Sacred Blood Demon's speed was greatly reduced. Then Old Tree and the others attacked together. The Five Elements Sect's Grand Ancestor must have heard the commotion. Quickly finish him off. Yi Xian's eyes flashed. This time he decided to use the Divine Sword technique. However, Sacred Blood Demon's strength was not bad. Facing the besiegement, he was still at ease. He even killed Old Tree, Black Horn, Black Gold Swordsman and Immortal Swordsman. Boom! At this time, Sacred Blood Demon sent the Five Elements Swordsman flying with a sickle. Fortunately, the Five Elements Swordsman used the power of 5 elements to neutralize most of the attack. Otherwise, he would have been killed by Sacred Blood Demon like Old Tree and the others. Whoosh! Seeing that the 5 Elements Swordsman was still alive, Sacred Blood Demon immediately rushed up, ready to kill him. This time, Divine Sword technique. Yi Xian opened his eyes wide and directly used his trump card. A Divine Sword slashed down on the 5 Elements Swordsman's head. Just then, Sacred Blood Demon rushed in front of the 5 Elements Swordsman. Rip! This slash split Sacred Blood Demon and the 5 Elements Swordsman in half. At the same time, Yi Xian quickly devoured the Eternal Emperor weapons to recover the cooldown of the Divine Sword technique. Then he devoured the Eternal Destiny Stone. Ding! The host has made a breakthrough. The host is now an 8th grade Eternal Emperor. He had directly broken through to the peak of the 8th grade Eternal Emperor realm. He was only one step away from the 9th grade Eternal Emperor realm. After the breakthrough, Yi Xian's speed increased a lot. Before the 3 drops of pseudo-divine blood appeared, he rushed over. He quickly wrapped 1 drop of pseudo-divine blood with Saint Power, and then refined it with the Divine Devouring system. As for the other 2 drops of fake divine blood, they had already dissipated into the air. They turned into 2 wisps of bloody mist and flew into the distance. Ding! Quasi-divine blood has been successfully refined. The system prompted. Huff huff, with my current level, it's a bit of a stretch to wrap the fake god blood with the Saint Power. Fortunately, my recovery speed is very fast. Otherwise, the fake god blood would have burst out of the Saint Power in the next moment. Yi Xian breathed a sigh of relief. After all, he was only a rank 8 Eternal Emperor. Being able to use his Saint Power to envelop the pseudo-divine blood for a short period of time was already quite impressive. The reason the 5 Elements Patriarch was able to hold on for more than an hour was because he was a half-step ruler, and had refined 5 drops of pseudo-divine blood. How could Yi Xian compare to him? The source of Yi Xian's strength was not the sacred power, but the bloodline. Another Sacred Blood Demon? After Yi Xian finished cleaning up, the 5 Elements Sect's old ancestor asked. No, it's just a powerful blood-colored plant, Yi Xian replied. Now he already had the strength to kill a Sacred Blood Demon, but he had to rely on the Divine Sword technique. Right now, the Divine Sword technique only had 1 cooldown time left, so he still needed the 5 Elements Sect's old ancestor. Continue. Yi Xian began to hurry on his way. He was thinking that it would be best to find some more corpses. This way, he might be able to pile up another cooldown time for the Divine Sword technique. In addition, he had also reached the peak of rank 8 Eternal Emperor. He was just a little bit away from breaking through to rank 9 Eternal Emperor. At that time, he might have the strength to fight a Sacred Blood Demon. Following that, Yi Xian explored for another 4 or 5 days. Unfortunately, he only found a corpse along the way, and there was nothing there. According to Yi Xian's analysis, this corpse was not killed by the Sacred Blood Demon, but by a sneak attack by his own people. What a pity, what a pity! Yi Xian shook his head helplessly. If this corpse was killed by the Sacred Blood Demon, then he might be able to break through to rank 9 Eternal Emperor. However, there would always be opportunities. There was no hurry. Sure enough, on the 2nd day after he continued to move forward, there was a loud rumbling sound in front of him. This was because someone was fighting. In the Scarlet Forest, the only people who could fight were those who had differences of opinion, or those who fought with Sacred Blood Demons. Yi Xian immediately rushed over. When he arrived, he saw 2 figures fighting with a Sacred Blood Demon. These 2 were only rank 1/2 sovereigns, but that Sacred Blood Demon was mutated from 6 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Its strength was very strong. Tisk tsk. I'm going to be a fisherman again. Yixian grinned and watched quietly. The two rank 1 half-sovereigns had already seen Yixian, but Yixian was only in rank 8 Eternal Emperor. It was already a miracle that he did not die in the Scarlet Forest. How could they expect him to help? Rip. Rip. Soon, the two men died one by one under the scythe of the Sacred Blood Demon. Then, the Sacred Blood Demon's blood-red eyes fell on Yixian. Whoosh! A gust of wind suddenly appeared. The Sacred Blood Demon charged toward Yixian. Haha, it's mine. Yixian laughed and quickly released Old Tree and the others to put away the two corpses. The things in the interspatial ring were enough to restore the Divine Sword technique once. It was also enough for him to break through to rank 9 Eternal Emperor, or even rank 99 Heaven's Mandate, which was the peak of rank 9 Eternal Emperor. Immediately, he ordered the 5-element swordsman to block the Sacred Blood Demon. Divine Sword technique. Yixian was ready to repeat the scene of that day, and kill the Sacred Blood Demon and the 5-element swordsman together. However, this Sacred Blood Demon was much stronger than the previous one. The Divine Sword technique fell and only killed the 5-element swordsman, while the Sacred Blood Demon only lost one of its arms. F***ck, I wasted one time. Yixian cursed and quickly used the items to restore the cooldown of the Divine Sword technique. Then he broke through again. Ding! The host's current fate ranking is rank 99. Ding! The host has broken through and is now a rank 9 Eternal Emperor. Ding! The host can choose to devour a drop of pseudo-divine blood to break through to rank 1 half-sovereign. When the system notification sounded, Yixian raised his eyebrows. For others, even after reaching rank 99, they would need to fuse their Dao fruit with their Dao heart to form a Dao heart. Once the Dao heart was formed, they would be a half-sovereign. However, they could only be considered a half-sovereign. Only by refining a drop of pseudo-divine blood could they be considered a rank 1 half-sovereign. Unexpectedly, the Divine Devouring system helped Yixian skip this step. As long as he devoured a drop of pseudo-divine blood at rank 99, he could break through to rank 1 half-sovereign. Yixian immediately devoured the drop of pseudo-divine blood. Chapter 2076. Ding! Host has refined a drop of pseudo-divine blood and formed a Dao heart. Host has broken through to first stage half-step sovereign. As the system notification sounded out, Yixian felt as if the environment within his body had undergone a tremendous change. His strength had increased by at least 20 times. Haha, Divine Blood Demon, right? Yixian suddenly laughed 3 times. He released Old Shoe and Black Horn, who had also broken through to the half-step ruler level. In addition, there was also the Black Gold Sword Attendant and the Undying Sword Attendant. As for the 5-element sword servants, they had been killed by his divine sword art and could only be released the next day. Boom! Now that everyone had broken through to the first stage half-step sovereign realm, their offensive prowess had skyrocketed. Everyone attacked at the same time, directly killing the Divine Blood Demon. This time Yixian did not even summon Wei Zhentian, so this Divine Blood Demon was almost at its peak. From Eternal Emperor to half-step sovereign, it's really a leap. Now, I have the ability to establish myself in the Scarlet Forest. Even if I don't use the Divine Sword art, I can still obtain the pseudo-divine blood. Yixian's lips curled up slightly. This meant that he did not need to work with the 5-element sect patriarch anymore. However, he did not get too excited. He had more important things to do. Whoosh! After the Divine Blood Demon transformed from 6 drops of Fake God blood died, the Fake God blood in his body appeared. Yixian had already rushed to its side and wrapped the 3 drops of pseudo-divine blood with his saint power. The 5-element sect patriarch could also wrap the 3 drops of pseudo-divine blood, but he could not refine all 3 at the same time. If he did so, he might not be able to refine even 1 drop. After all, it would take him more than an hour to do so. However, Yixian was different. After wrapping the 3 drops of pseudo-divine blood, he immediately used the Divine Devouring system to refine them. The refining speed was much faster than the 5-element sect patriarchs. Just as Yixian's saint power was about to run out, the 3 drops of pseudo-divine blood were successfully refined. Even second-stage half-step sovereigns could not refine 3 drops of pseudo-divine blood in one go. Haha, 3 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Awesome! Yixian grinned and swallowed the 3 drops of faux god blood. However, after swallowing the 3 drops of fake god blood, his strength did not increase much. That's strange. I've already refined 4 drops of pseudo-divine blood, which is only slightly less than the 5 drops from the 5 elements sect's old ancestor. Why? Yixian took a closer look and was immediately shocked. What the hell? Others would need 99 drops of quasi-divine blood to break through from rank 1 half-step sovereign to peak rank 9 half-step sovereign. As for him, he actually needed 999 drops. The amount of fake god blood he needed was actually 10 times more than the others. What the f***ck? The amount of fake god blood I need is 10 times more than the others. But fortunately, it would take years for others to refine a drop of fake god blood. But I only need a moment. Yixian reacted quickly. He had the divine devouring system. As long as he had enough quasi-divine blood, he could quickly break through to become a rank 9 undying dominator. Or even a false god. The 5 elements sect's old ancestor, who was following behind Yixian, heard the battle and immediately asked, "No, I didn't encounter any divine blood demons, but you can come over," Yixian said to the 5 elements sect's old ancestor. Not long after, the 5 elements sect's old ancestor came over and looked at Yixian. However, in the next moment he turned pale with fright. Half-step sovereign? The 5 elements sect's old ancestor was shocked. When he first brought Yixian to the Scarlet Forest, Yixian was only a rank 8 eternal emperor. Now, he had actually broken through to become a half-step sovereign? How was this possible? Old man, I said at that time that I would be able to cure you in less than a month. You thought I was exaggerating, but now do you still think so? Yixian revealed a smile. The 5 elements sect's old ancestor swallowed his saliva. This was simply inconceivable. However, this was the truth because Yixian was standing in front of him. Don't think that you can fight me like this. The 5 elements sect's old ancestor snorted. We'll know after we try, but I'm sure that you'll pay the price in blood. Yixian's eyes flashed as he released the 5 elements sword attendants. All of them were half-step sovereigns. This time, the 5 elements sect's old ancestor was shocked. Even with his strength, he could not cause any harm to Yixian. Now that he was facing so many half-step sovereigns, how could he? Go. The 5 elements sect's old ancestor made a prompt decision and turned to leave. Unfortunately, Yixian was 1 step faster and flashed behind him. By the time he turned around, Yixian had already made his move. Rip. A sword light flashed, and the 5 elements sect's old ancestor's head flew into the air. Dead. After he died, Yixian put away his corpse and muttered, "Since you told me this secret, I won't let you die in vain. In the future, I will revive you so that you can continue to live in the devouring space." After saying this, he devoured the drop of pseudo-divine blood in the 5 elements sect's old ancestor's yin and yang ring. His strength had undergone a slight change again. Other first-stage half-step sovereigns only needed to refine 11 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Yixian, on the other hand, could refine 111 drops. Therefore, a single drop of pseudo-divine blood had little effect on him. However, he had a devouring ability that others did not have. He immediately continued to move. In the following days, he continued to travel through the Scarlet Forest. The Old Tree, Black Horn, Black Gold Sword Attendants, Undying Sword Attendants, and 5 Elements Sword Attendants could all take charge of collecting pseudo-divine blood for Yixian. In a short few days, Yixian had collected more than 100 drops of pseudo-divine blood. After devouring all of them, he reached second-stage half-step sovereign realm. Of course, this was all thanks to the divine-grade devouring system's refining speed. Otherwise, he could only refine 1 drop of pseudo-divine blood at a time. After breaking through to second-stage half-step sovereign realm, the refining speed has increased by quite a bit. However, the amount of pseudo-divine blood required is still the same. My breakthrough speed is probably much faster than before. Yixian raised his eyebrows. Others would find it harder and harder to refine pseudo-divine blood. Although he needed 10 times as much pseudo-divine blood, devouring it was equivalent to refining it. Therefore, he did not need to worry about this problem. Simply put, the half-step sovereign realm was more difficult at the beginning, but it would get easier and easier as he progressed. Just like this, another 2 days passed. Yixian relied on his extraordinary methods to hunt down a large number of divine blood demons. After devouring the pseudo-divine blood he obtained, he broke through to third stage half-step sovereign realm. At this time he was wondering if he should let his main body enter and hunt the divine blood demons. However, this was just a thought. His main body was different from the sword god clone. He could die. The divine blood demons in this blood forest relied on physical attacks. Even with the void spirit divine armor and black gold divine armor, he would still be in danger. Therefore it was better to wait outside. Chapter 2077. Right now, Yi Xian could already kill more than 30 drops of pseudo-divine blood that had mutated into divine blood demons. However, he could only refine less than 10 of these drops at once. Therefore, he might as well go and kill about 10 drops of divine blood demons. That would be faster. However, that was what most people thought. They were also pacing around the periphery of the blood forest. However, Yi Xian's favorite wasn't hunting divine blood demons but humans. This was because they more or less had pseudo-divine blood in their interspatial rings. One had to admit that the blood forest was very famous. Many half-step dominators had entered. It just so happened that these people benefited Yi Xian. With Yi Xian's current strength, he could even fight a rank 5 half-step dominator. In the periphery he was the heavens. Not a single person who was seen by him was spared. Soon he broke through to rank 5 half-step dominator. Right now he had refined more than 560 drops of divine blood. This amount of pseudo-divine blood was enough for 5 people to break through to the dominator realm. Of course, while pseudo-divine blood was easy to obtain, refining it wasn't. Even if one had a large amount of pseudo-divine blood, it would be useless if they couldn't refine it. RIP. Somewhere in the blood forest, Yi Xian finished off an unlucky rank 3 half-step dominator with a single slash. Then he checked it. Tsh, only 10 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Yi Xian shook his head helplessly and then started to devour. Right now, he had devoured nearly 600 drops of pseudo-divine blood. If he worked harder, he could break through to rank 6 half-step dominator. At that time he would go to the blood forest to take a look and see what that divine blood demon king looked like. However, right at this moment, rumble. Suddenly, a series of loud noises came from the horizon. Yi Xian listened carefully and found that the scale of the battle wasn't small. It was probably a group battle. He didn't know if it was human versus human, or human versus divine blood demons. In any case, Yi Xian liked this kind of battle. Immediately he rushed toward the source of the sound. After a short while, he saw nearly 20 figures fighting. Half of them were humans, and their cultivation was around rank 4 or 5 half-step sovereigns. One of them was a rank 6 half-step sovereign. On the other side it was the divine blood demon. However, among these divine blood demons, there was a very special divine blood demon. I will stall the divine blood devil. You guys finish him quickly. The rank 6 half-step ruler roared furiously. Hearing this, Yi Xian took a closer look and found that there were more than 70 drops of pseudo-divine blood in the large sacred blood demon. A rank 7 dominator ranked divine blood demon. No, not a divine blood demon but a divine blood demon general. This was also the strongest person Yi Xian had seen since entering the Scarlet Forest. This battle was extremely intense. The figures of both sides flashed, causing Yi Xian's eyes to be dazzled. However, he only watched for a while before he knew the outcome of this battle. The humans were probably going to be wiped out. At this time, several divine blood demons had already killed their opponents. The originally evenly matched battle was instantly broken with the deaths of these few people. Yi Xian watched from afar. He had only met by chance, so there was no need for him to save them. One had to know that he was also a hunter. Asking him to be a savior, what kind of joke was that? What he needed to do was wait for these humans to die before he made a move. Simply put, he was waiting to reap the benefits. However, things were not that simple. Swish! A crisp sound suddenly rang out. Yi Xian took a closer look and found that the rank 6 half-step sovereign was still no match for the rank 7 divine blood devil general and had been killed. Once he died, the others were a motley crew that was instantly killed by the divine blood devil general. The ground was littered with corpses. The divine blood devil general glanced at the blood-red eyes, then transformed into a beam of bloody light that shot into the body of the rank 6 half-step sovereign. In the next instant it shot out again. However, when it left that corpse it had already turned into a dried corpse. Then it used the same method to suck the blood out of all the corpses. When it reappeared, Yixian saw that there was actually one more drop of pseudo-divine blood in its body. Heavens! This divine blood devil general absorbed the blood of humans and condensed pseudo-divine blood? Yixian raised his eyebrows in shock. What was going on? However, he could not be bothered to care so much and directly shot out. Beast God Clock suppress. Yixian quickly summoned Wei Jintian. Instantly, these divine blood devils and the divine blood devil general had 80% of their strength suppressed. Whoosh! 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 Old Tree and the others instantly charged out. As for the sword god clone, it had already flashed behind the divine blood devil general. Poochie! In an instant, a powerful attack killed the divine blood devil general that was only a rank 7 half-step sovereign. However, what surprised Yixian was that of the 78 drops of fake divine blood in the divine blood demon general's body, other than the 10 drops that Yixian had wrapped around with his saint energy, only 50 drops had dissipated. The rest were actually still in the divine blood demon general's body. Ding! Refining successful. A system notification sounded in Yixian's mind. He was a little surprised. He forced the pseudo-divine blood out of the divine blood devil general's body, and then collected it. Could this pseudo-divine blood be condensed from the blood of humans that the divine blood devil general absorbed? Yixian thought to himself. However, he did not think too deeply about it and directly swallowed the pseudo-divine blood. Ding! The host has broken through. The host is now a rank 6 half-step sovereign. Yixian's realm increased again. In fact, there was no need for him to stay in the Scarlet Forest any longer. At his level, there were many pseudo-divine blood. The difficult part was refining it. However, he wanted to see the divine blood devil king. Moreover, this was the place where the pseudo-divine had fallen. Perhaps there would be some unexpected fortuitous encounters. Otherwise, why would those who did not lack the pseudo-divine blood enter the Scarlet Forest? Wasn't it for the inheritance of the pseudo-divine? Next, he killed the divine blood devil immortal beasts one by one to refine the pseudo-divine blood. Each of them gave him more than 10 drops of pseudo-divine blood. This time he had really profited. In just one trip, he had obtained a lot of pseudo-divine blood. At this moment, Yixian suddenly saw the pseudo-divine blood dissipate into wisps of blood mist and drift into the distance. Yixian's eyes flashed. He decided to follow and see. However, the blood mist drifted very quickly. Even the Saint Power could not stop it. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. However, Yixian continued to move north. Along the way, he encountered some pseudo-divine blood and harvested all of it. Now that he was a rank 6 half-step sovereign, he could refine more than 10 drops of pseudo-divine blood in one go. Chapter 2078. However, just as Yixian was about to break through the 800 mark, he sensed a thick scent of blood in front of him. Yixian raised an eyebrow. Using the Eye of Revelation, he discovered that there were more than 100 divine blood demons. I've struck gold. His eyes lit up. There were so many divine blood demons. If he could kill them one by one, it would be a huge fortune. Immediately, he had the old tree move out and lure the divine blood demons. As expected with such a large group, if there was any disturbance in the surroundings, they would naturally not attack together. The first time, he had only lured 3 divine blood demons. Yixian killed the 3 divine blood demons and extracted 40 drops of divine blood. Ding! Host has broken through. Host is now a rank 7 half-step ruler. One needed 111 drops of divine blood to break through once. If Yixian could kill all these divine blood demons, he could at least break through to the ruler realm. Next, he had the old tree lure a few more divine blood demons over and kill them. The third time and a few more times. After the third time, he had broken through to rank 8 half-step ruler realm. With 10 more divine blood demons, he could break through to rank 9 half-step ruler realm. However, at this moment, whoosh! Suddenly, a gust of wind sounded in Yixian's ears. He turned his head and saw a scarlet scythe slashing toward him. Poof! The scarlet scythe slashed the sword god clone's neck. The powerful force instantly sent him flying. A ruler realm divine blood demon? Yixian sensed it and was frightened. Those divine blood demons were at most rank 8 half-step rulers, but now, he actually saw a ruler realm divine blood demon? No, this was not a divine blood demon, nor was it a divine blood demon general. It was a divine blood demon king. This was because Yixian could not see through this divine blood demon. Who knew how many drops of divine blood there were inside? If this was not a divine blood demon king, what could it be? Hiss! Hiss! Seeing that its scythe had not killed Yixian, the divine blood demon king's eyes darted around. Once again, it turned into a bloody blur and slashed at the sword god clone's neck. This attack still did not injure the sword god clone. I finally met you. Die. The corners of the sword god avatar's mouth curled up slightly, and he immediately released Old Shu and the others. Kill. However, what surprised Yixian was that Old Shu, Black Horn, the black gold sword attendant, and the undying sword attendant were like clay chickens and pottery dogs in front of this divine blood demon king. In the blink of an eye, they were completely annihilated. Even the 5 elements sword attendants were instantly killed. Yixian sighed in his heart. He didn't know what realm this divine blood demon king had reached. 2. Bang! 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 In the following battle, the sword god clone was in a passive position. He could not fight back at all. In the distance, the divine blood demons and divine blood demon generals were watching because their king was dealing with the enemy. However, no matter how strong this divine blood demon king was, it could not hurt the sword god clone at all. At this time, the divine blood demon king's eyes darted around. It turned into a bloody light and left, flashing into the middle of the group of divine blood demons and divine blood demon generals. The next moment, Yixian saw the bodies of these divine blood demons explode. The divine blood demon king's body instantly merged with the divine blood demon king's body. The divine blood demon king was absorbing other divine blood demons to increase its strength. Seeing this, Yixian immediately understood. This divine blood demon king had probably gained sentience. That was why it knew how to absorb its own kind to strengthen itself. After absorbing so much divine blood, the divine blood demon king's strength increased several times. It immediately charged at the sword god clone. Unfortunately, it still could not hurt the sword god clone. Too scary. Yixian sighed inwardly. He was hesitating whether to use the divine sword technique or not. However, this divine blood demon king was much faster than him. After absorbing the other divine blood demons, its speed was so fast that even he could not catch up to it. It would be a waste to use the divine sword technique. Besides, even if the divine sword technique killed this divine blood demon king, it could only extract a dozen drops of divine blood at most. It was not worth it. Humph, I won't waste time with you. Let's go. Yixian thought to himself. He was ready to take the sword god clone away. However, at this time, a system notification sounded in his mind. Ding! The host has triggered a random mission. Kill the divine blood demon king in the bloody forest. A random mission was actually triggered at this time. Kill my ass. Let's go. The next moment, the divine blood demon king lost its target because the sword god clone was taken back by Yixian. At this time, somewhere outside the bloody forest, that divine blood demon king has already gained sentience. It knows how to let other divine blood demons kill humans to gather divine blood demon king's blood, and then absorb the divine blood demons to increase its strength. It looks like it won't be easy to deal with, Yixian thought to himself as he looked at the scarlet kill character in the sky. Soon the bloody forest would probably become hell. Anyone who saw the divine blood demon king would probably not be able to survive. That divine blood demon king is hunting others. I just need to avoid it. I want to see if you can increase your strength faster than me, Yixian thought to himself. He broke through the void and entered the bloody forest again. In the following time, he continued to wander the bloody forest and hunt divine blood demons. In less than a day, he broke through to the 9th stage half-step sovereign realm. He was only one step away from the sovereign realm. He turned his head and looked at the scarlet kill character in the sky. He wondered what realm the divine blood demon king was at now. However, he did not think too much about it and continued to search for divine blood demons. Another day passed. Ding! The host has broken through. The host is now a 1st stage sovereign realm. Finally, Yixian broke through to the sovereign realm. However, when he was a half-step sovereign, he needed 111 drops of false god blood to advance one level. Now that he had broken through to the sovereign realm, he needed 1111 drops of false god blood to advance one level. Therefore, his breakthrough speed slowed down again. Now that you've broken through to the sovereign realm, let me go and meet you. Yi Xian thought to himself as he rushed toward the Scarlet Kill character. Previously, he had only encountered a 9th stage half-step sovereign realm human in the Bloody Forest. Now that he had broken through to the sovereign realm, he could practically call himself the king of the Bloody Forest. Of course, he did not know how many divine blood demons the Divine Blood Demon King had absorbed or what realm it had reached. However, the Sword God's clone was immortal, so what if he met it? The Divine Blood Demon King's movements were irregular, but Yi Xian moved in a straight line. He estimated that he could probably fight that Divine Blood Demon King. Chapter 2079. It took 3 whole days to catch up to the Divine Blood Beast King. In these 3 days, Yi Xian's cultivation had broken through from early stage to middle stage. The amount of false god blood in his body had already reached 1,600 drops. After being strengthened by the false god blood, his body was as hard as a rock. Even if he didn't use the Void Spirit Godly Armor and the Black Gold Godly Armor, he would probably be able to withstand the attacks of a half-step Dominator level Divine Blood Beast King. At this time, Yi Xian estimated the distance. In about a minute, he would be able to come into contact with the Divine Blood Beast King. A minute later, Yi Xian finally caught up to the Divine Blood Beast King. At this time, the two were looking at each other. Hiss! The Divine Blood Beast King's body was made of blood. The sound of flowing blood was like that of a venomous snake. It had already unlocked its intelligence, so it recognized Yi Xian. Back then it didn't kill Yi Xian and let Yi Xian escape. Today Yi Xian took the initiative to come to him. Just nice. Yi Xian also looked at the Divine Blood Beast King. He discovered that the Divine Blood Beast King's body had grown by at least half. It seemed that its strength had also increased by a lot. Kill. At this time Yi Xian released the Old Tree and Black Horn. They attacked the Divine Blood Beast King from 3 directions. Shio! The Divine Blood Beast King moved at the same time. It first dealt with the Old Tree, then Black Horn. Then it slashed at Yi Xian's neck with its scythe. Unfortunately, it didn't hit Yi Xian's main body, but the Sword God clone. So strong. Its attack power is at least at the level of a 5th stage Dominator. Yi Xian couldn't help but sigh. He was only a 1st stage Dominator now, but the Divine Blood Beast King was already a 5th stage Dominator. Wasn't this speed of improvement a bit too fast? After all, Yi Xian only leveled up so fast because of the God-level Devouring system. However, he couldn't care so much anymore. Fight! Rumble! The Sword God's avatar kept summoning the Old Tree and Black Horn to fight the Divine Blood Demon King. As for the Black Gold Sword Servants, the Immortal Sword Servants, and the 5-element Sword Servants, Yi Xian kept them on standby, waiting for the right opportunity because they had cooldowns after death. The battle was extremely intense. Although Yi Xian had broken through to become a rank 1 sovereign, his strength was still far from that of a Divine Blood Beast King. Even with the help of the Old Tree and Black Horn, he still couldn't make up for the difference. Humph, I have a trump card. Yi Xian immediately summoned the Black Gold Sword Servants, Undying Sword Servants, and 5-element Sword Servants. Then, together with the Old Tree and Black Cove, they would launch a 6-sided pincer attack. Swish! The Holy Blood Demon King was not afraid at all. He rushed toward the nearest Black Gold Sword Servant. Yi Xian took the opportunity to summon Wei Zhentian. Beast God Clock, suppress him. In the blink of an eye, Wei Zhentian turned into the Beast God Bell. The next moment, the Demon King of Divine Blood, who had just arrived in front of the Black Gold Swordsman and was about to raise its scythe to attack, was greatly slowed down. Divine Sword Technique. Yi Xian's eyes flashed. He took out the Sky Splitter Divine Sword and slashed down. He had tried and tested this move many times. Whether it was the Divine Blood Demon, the Divine Blood Demon General, or the Divine Blood Demon King in front of him, they all fought in close combat. However, he had underestimated the Divine Blood Demon King's strength. The Divine Sword Technique slashed down and hit the Black Gold Sword Servants, but not the Divine Blood Demon King. What? Yi Xian was shocked. He realized that the Divine Blood Demon King suddenly increased its speed when it was about to be hit by the Sky Splitter Divine Sword. It seemed that the Divine Blood Demon King was also holding back. In the battle just now, it hadn't used its full strength. Therefore, the Sky Splitter Divine Sword missed. However, how could Yi Xian not have a backup plan? Swish! There were already many attacks on the Divine Blood Demon King's path of retreat. Among them, the 5-element sword servant's attacks were the most powerful. With a muffled sound, the Divine Blood Demon King's bloody body was split in half by the 5-element sword servant's attacks. It hit. Yi Xian raised an eyebrow. This was the first time he had hit a Divine Blood Demon King. Although the Divine Sword technique did not hit, it was already very good that it could injure the Divine Blood Demon King. The Divine Blood Demon King was split in half by the 5-element sword servant's attacks. The pseudo-divine blood in its body was also split in half. However, after that, Yi Xian was a bit surprised. He saw that the two halves of the Divine Blood Demon King's body actually reformed with a swish. Now there were two Divine Blood Demon Kings. Of course, the divine blood in its body was split in half. Not dead? Again. Yi Xian immediately ordered an attack. The Divine Blood Demon King was suppressed by the Beast God Bell and injured by the 5-element sword servants. It had to split, so its strength naturally decreased. Under the attacks of Yi Xian and the others, its two bloody bodies split again into more than 10. Damn, are you an earthworm? Yi Xian was helpless. However, he did not believe that the Divine Blood Demon King was immortal, so he continued to attack. Soon this Divine Blood Demon King had split into more than 100. This was not the point. The point was that these 100 Divine Blood Demon Kings actually started to merge. In the blink of an eye, 4 of them had merged. Still want to recover? Yi Xian raised an eyebrow. He quickly attacked and split the Divine Blood Demon King into countless parts again. However, this time the Divine Blood Demon Kings did not merge again. Instead, they scattered. More than 100 Divine Blood Demon Kings scattered like waves, fleeing in all directions. Damn, what should I do? Yi Xian was helpless. He did not know which one to chase. Even the death warrant had disappeared after the Sacred Blood Demon King split up. Helpless, Yi Xian did not care too much. He ordered Old Tree and the others to attack. More than 100 Divine Blood Demon Kings multiplied until there were almost 1,000 of them. Every Divine Blood Demon King had a drop of pseudo-god blood in them. Furthermore, their vitality was much stronger than ordinary Divine Blood Demons. In the end, Yi Xian only killed 100 Divine Blood Demon Kings and obtained 100 drops of pseudo-god blood. So difficult to deal with. Yi Xian could not help but sigh inwardly. If he had been a rank 2 sovereign just now, he should have been able to kill all the Divine Blood Demon Kings. Unfortunately, he was only a rank 1 sovereign. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame himself for underestimating his enemy. He should have broken through again. However, now that he had broken through to rank 1 sovereign, he would need more than 500 drops of pseudo-god blood to level up. This was not a small number. He would need at least 1 or 2 days. Don't forget that Yi Xian was currently doing a random mission. The longer he took, the lower the reward. Chase! Yi Xian did not care too much. He decided to chase after the Divine Blood Demon Kings and kill as many as he could. However, when these Sacred Blood Lesser Demon Kings met other Sacred Blood Demons and Sacred Blood Demon Generals, they could fuse with them and grow. After that, they would gather together again. The Divine Blood Demon Kings were reborn again. Ding! The target of the death warrant has reappeared. Chapter 2080. Hearing this, Yi Xian raised his eyebrows and hurriedly looked around. Indeed, he found a scarlet kill in the sky. At that moment, he immediately charged over. However, he felt that the Divine Blood Beast King's speed had increased significantly this time. It seemed that it had absorbed another Divine Blood Beast King. This wasn't the main point. The main point was that when Yi Xian was halfway there, he discovered that the Divine Blood Beast King had actually left the Blood Forest. It left. Yi Xian was somewhat shocked, but he didn't think much of it and immediately pursued. Unfortunately, the Divine Blood Beast King was faster than him, and the distance between the two kept increasing. Yi Xian chased fiercely for 3 days, but was left behind for at least 2 days. However, on the 7th day, the Divine Blood Beast King finally stopped. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yi Xian quickly caught up and shortened the distance. Finally, he arrived at a large city. Strange, this Divine Blood Beast King can actually enter the city? Yi Xian was somewhat surprised, but he also entered the large city. He followed the death hunt command and arrived in front of a family. The Su family. He asked around and discovered that the Su family was a large family in this city. The family head was a rank 6 dominator expert. There's actually such an expert. Looks like I have to disguise myself and enter. Yixian thought to himself. He immediately left and found a member of the Su family with a lower realm. After killing him, he would use the mask of authenticity to devour him. Of course, Yixian added this unlucky person to the list of people to be resurrected. He would compensate him in the future. Then, he disguised himself as a member of the Su family and entered the Su family residence. This divine blood beast king is in the east. After entering the Su family residence, Yixian approached the east side. However, just as he was about to approach, someone suddenly stopped him. Su Mu, this is the eldest young master's residence. You shouldn't be here. Hurry up and scram. Suddenly, a shout rang in Yixian's ears. He turned around and saw that the speaker was a rank 2 dominator Su family member. A mere rank 2 dominator dares to be so arrogant in front of me? Yixian immediately used the deathly hunt command to mark his opponent and blinked behind him. The next moment, the man's head flew up and was instantly sucked into the devouring space. Most likely, the Su family disciple would never have imagined that he, a rank 2 dominator, would be instantly killed by Su Mu, a rank 9 half-step dominator. Yixian then disguised himself as a Su family disciple and performed a soul search on him. The eldest young master that this Su family disciple spoke of was the Su family's patriarch's son, Su Tai. He had just returned from training outside yesterday. Furthermore, this Su family disciple coincidentally bumped into Su Tai once. Blood-eyed. Yixian was a little surprised. From the memories of the Su clan's disciples, he knew that Su Tai's eyes were black, and after returning from the training this time, his eyes turned red, and his entire person was different. Therefore, Yixian was sure that Su Tai was probably already dead, and the one who had taken over his body was probably a divine blood demon king. At that moment, Yixian leaped into the air and began to attack the scarlet word. Xiao! 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 A series of sharp sounds broke through the air as Yixian's attacks broke through the roof and entered. Pung! 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 In an instant, the attacks were all defeated. Immediately after, the Su family's eldest young master, Su Tai, who was having fun inside, leaped out. It's you. Su Tai's pair of blood-red eyes looked at Yixian. It's really you. Yixian's brows rose as he said. Divine Blood Demon King. You think that you can't escape death by possessing his body? Haha, you didn't kill me that day. Perfect, today I can take revenge for that day. Su Tai coldly snorted. Just you? Yixian narrowed his eyes as he said. To be able to chase me here, you do have some ability. However, you have to look at where you are standing. Su Tai said. You are merely a divine blood demon king that possessed the Su family's eldest young master's body. As long as I tell the truth, let's see if the Su family will help you or help me. Yixian's lips slightly curled. Is that so? Then let's see if they believe you or not. From the moment I killed him and possessed his body, he was me and I was him. I want to see if the others believe you or me. Su Tai said. Since that's the case, then we have nothing more to say. Die. Yixian didn't waste any more words as he directly summoned the old tree and black horn to attack Su Tai together. His strength had already broken through to rank 2 dominator while they were rushing over, while Su Tai's current aura was that of a rank 3 dominator. However, Yixian felt that it wasn't that simple. A divine blood demon king's strength was much stronger than a rank 3 dominator. If it wasn't for the suppression of the beast god Bell, he probably wouldn't have been able to deal with the divine blood demon king that day. Indeed, when Yixian and the other two attacked, Su Tai also attacked. He directly turned into a ray of bloody light and instantly dealt with the old tree and black horn. At the same time, many people from the Su family leaped into the sky and surrounded Yixian. Before you came, I had already ransacked the Su family. Do you think that I'm only a rank 3 dominator? Su Tai coldly laughed. In the next instant, Yixian felt a powerful pressure. Of course, this pressure was useless against him. Rank 6 dominator. When Yixian felt this powerful aura, his expression changed. A divine blood demon king could devour fake divine blood to increase his strength. Just as he said, he had already ransacked the entire Su family. Not only that, The Su family's experts had already been possessed by the divine blood demon generals he had split off. Simply speaking, the Su family was now his world. With my current strength, I'm afraid that I won't be able to deal with a rank 6 dominator. Yi Xian thought to himself as he looked around at the group of Su family's experts, who were all at least rank 4 dominators. However, he didn't feel the slightest bit of fear because this was the sword god's clone. Kill. Following Su Tai's order, the Su family's experts, including the Su family's master, all charged towards Yi Xian. Since that's the case, let's start a massacre. Yi Xian's eyes flickered as he directly used his War God domain and pulled a rank 5 dominator into it. In the War God domain, the higher the opponent's rank, the greater the amplification Yi Xian would obtain after defeating them. This was also the reason why Yi Xian didn't use it against rank 4 dominators. Back then, when the Divine Blood Demon King was cut in half, he was also caught unprepared, so he couldn't use it. Today he must kill the Divine Blood Demon King. What's going on? The Su family expert possessed by the Divine Blood Demon generals raised his brows as he looked at Yi Xian with a strange expression. Before he could react, Yi Xian gathered Old Tree and the others and charged over. Chapter 2081. Yi Xian successfully killed the rank 5 dominator within the time limit set by the God of War domain, and received an increase in strength. Following the death of this person, the God of War domain also shattered. The surrounding space and time returned to normal. Yi Xian's strength increased sharply as he attacked with all his might. On the other side, the Divine Blood Beast King Su Tai couldn't help but narrow his eyes as he watched this battle. He had already unlocked his intelligence and could naturally see that Yi Xian's aptitude was even higher than Su Tai's. Yi Xian, who was only a rank 2 dominator, was actually able to possess such battle strength. It was indeed extraordinary. Thus, he had his eyes on Yi Xian's body and was waiting for an opportunity to attack. However, as the battle continued, the Su family's experts fell one after another. Unfortunately, to Yi Xian's disappointment, these Su family experts were all possessed by the Divine Blood Demon generals that were split from the Divine Blood Demon King. Therefore, all of the divine blood they had left behind was devoured by the Divine Blood Demon generals and the Divine Blood Demon King. Yi Xian killed a few people in succession, but these people did not have a single drop of fake divine blood in their yin and yang rings. Whoosh! Just at this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Yi Xian turned his head and saw Su Tai open his mouth and shoot out a ray of bloody light. Poof! This ray of bloody light shot towards the sword god clone's chest like an arrow, but the latter's invincible body blocked this ray of bloody light. Yi Xian squinted and discovered that this ray of bloody light was the Divine Blood Beast King. Humph, humph. You think you can take over my body? Yi Xian sneered. What a joke. The sword god clone was an invincible existence. Even a fake god would not be able to kill the sword god clone. Furthermore, this was just a Divine Blood Beast King formed from the blood of a fake god. This body of yours, I'm going to take it. The Divine Blood Beast King's eyes flickered as he turned into a bloody mist and enveloped the sword god clone. However, in his original form he was unable to speak. It is impossible for you to take over the sword god's body. Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly, but he did not chase the Sacred Blood Demon King away immediately. As for the others, they were left to the Old Tree, Black Horn, Black Gold Sword Servants, Undead Sword Servants, and the 5 Elements Sword Servants. Regrettably, Yi Xian had been chasing after the Divine Blood Beast Kings, and didn't have the time to gather materials. Adding on the fact that he was already a rank 2 dominator, he had a shocking amount of materials to recover the Divine Sword Art. Thus, he was still unable to use the Divine Sword Art. The Divine Blood Demon King didn't care about the lives of others, and just wrapped the Sword God avatar up. As a result, the others were killed by the 5 Elements Sword Attendants one by one. Even the Su family's family head, a rank 6 dominator, had died in battle. However, after these demon generals died, they all turned into their true forms and gathered toward the Demon King. Soon, only the Sacred Blood Demon King and Yi Xian were left in the sky. Old Tree, go and collect the pseudo-divine blood. Yi Xian immediately gave the order. Okay. Old Tree nodded and immediately dispersed. Immediately after, a reign of terror was set off in this city. All those who had reached the dominator level were killed. To become a dominator, one needed 100 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Although Yixian needed 10 times more pseudo-divine blood than ordinary people, this was already the 7th layer of heaven. There were as many dominators as dogs. Soon, Yixian collected a large amount of pseudo-divine blood. However, he didn't immediately devour it. Instead, he stored it. To break through from rank 1 to rank 2, Yixian needed more than 1,000 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Similarly, to break through from rank 2 to rank 3, he also needed more than 1,000 drops of pseudo-divine blood. Breaking through would become faster and faster. Soon, this city was stirred up by Old Tree and the others. Even the city lord was mobilized. However, this couldn't stop Old Tree and the others. In less than an hour, Old Tree and the others had collected several thousand drops of pseudo-divine blood. Immediately after, Yixian directly devoured them. Ding! Host broke through. Current rank 3 dominator. System notifications rang out one after another. Yixian directly broke through from rank 2 dominator to rank 6 dominator. His aura instantly soared. What? In the sky above the Su family, the Divine Blood Beast King felt Yixian's aura and was extremely shocked. Unfortunately, it was too late. Die! Yixian took out the Beast God Clock and directly suppressed the Divine Blood Beast King. Then he attacked with all his strength. In an instant, the Divine Blood Beast King's body split into 2, then split again. In the end, it actually split into several hundred Divine Blood Beast Kings. Today, I'll kill all of your little clones. Let's see if you can still survive. Yixian opened his eyes wide. As a rank 6 dominator, his strength was actually close to a rank 9 dominator. Wouldn't killing a Divine Blood Beast King be easy? In less than 2 seconds, under the combined attacks of Old Tree and the others, these Divine Blood Beast Kings fell one by one. In the end, not a single one was left. Strange, all of my clones are dead. Why are there no system notifications? After Yixian killed the last Divine Blood Beast King, he asked in surprise. At this moment, he suddenly felt a strange aura and immediately looked over. He discovered that there was an extra large drop of fake god blood in front of him. The fake god blood in the bodies of those Divine Blood Beast Kings had already been collected by him. The Divine Blood Beast Kings had devoured at least 10,000 drops of fake god blood. However, Yixian only obtained a few hundred drops of fake god blood from them. What's going on? Could it be that they were all devoured by this drop of fake god blood? Just as Yixian was about to collect this extra large drop of fake god blood, it suddenly trembled violently and flew into the distance. Damn, it escaped? Yixian raised his eyebrows. He immediately used the Divine Devouring system to analyze it, and discovered that this drop of essence blood was the Divine Blood Beast King's essence blood. It was the true form of the Divine Blood Beast King, which was why it could devour so much fake god blood to strengthen itself. Trying to escape? Yixian immediately gave chase. However, the Divine Blood Beast King's essence blood was extremely fast and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, the Death Hunt command didn't lose its target like last time. Yixian looked at the scarlet word kill and ran madly. At the same time, Old Tree and the others split up to collect fake god blood. Yixian's chase lasted for several days. In these few days, Old Tree and the others split up to collect a large amount of fake god blood. Yixian's realm had already reached the 9th grade sovereign realm. Coincidentally, Yixian had also caught up to the Divine Blood Beast King. They would meet in an hour. This Divine Blood Beast King is so difficult to deal with. This time I have to kill it. Otherwise, the random mission reward will be worrying. Yixian thought to himself as he entered a scorching land. It was said that there was a powerful phoenix in this scorching land. Previously, when Yixian had just arrived at the 6th heaven, he had accepted a mission from the innate gate to kill an undying phoenix. Chapter 2082. However, this time, Yixian was not facing the undying phoenix. An hour later, Yixian finally found the escaping Divine Blood Beast King. However, he had already occupied the body of a phoenix. This phoenix was called the Undying Phoenix. When Yixian heard this name, he sighed. This was because he had once merged with the bloodline of the Undying Phoenix. The Undying Phoenix had extremely strong recovery abilities. In addition, it had undying clones and so on. He wondered if the Undying Phoenix in front of him was the same. Divine Blood Beast King, do you think you cannot escape death just because you have an undying sovereign realm Undying Phoenix? Yixian said coldly. Haha. Although I don't know what method you used to catch me, I have been waiting for you this time. The undying phoenix suddenly opened its mouth and spoke in human language. Oh, I want to see what kind of ambush you have set up. Yixian looked around. In the next moment, a large number of figures appeared, and the surrounding temperature suddenly soared. It turned out that there was more than one undying phoenix here. There were many. Moreover, all of them were undying sovereigns. After the divine blood beast king had escaped here, he had occupied the undying phoenix king's body. Then, he let the divine blood beast generals he had created to occupy the bodies of the other undying phoenixes. At this time there were dozens of undying sovereign realm undying phoenixes surrounding Yixian. Facing such a situation, Yixian only raised his eyebrows slightly. He did not know how many times he had experienced such a scene. In short, he was not weak. Coincidentally, the undying phoenix was a sacred beast of the fire element, and the 5 element sword servants were immune to all attacks of the 5 elements. Coupled with the deterrence of Wei Zhontian's beast god Bell, the surrounding undying sovereign realm undying phoenixes were still a bunch of chickens and pottery dogs. Even if he had not broken through to the undying sovereign realm, Yixian was enough to deal with them. Boom! 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 Immediately, a shocking battle broke out in this scorching land. Undying godly phoenixes fell one after another. Then, divine blood demon generals appeared one after another and were killed. These divine blood demon generals split from the divine blood demon king, only have 1 drop of pseudo-divine blood in their bodies, but they are indeed very powerful. This is unreasonable, Yixian thought to himself. However, in this world many things did not make sense. After all, the divine blood demon king was formed from the blood essence of a fake god. Soon all the immortal phoenix were dead. However, as the king of the immortal phoenix, the divine blood demon king was still standing strong. Its recovery speed was unprecedented, even surpassing that of Yixian. But this was nothing in front of Yixian. Restrain him! Yixian transmitted his voice to everyone. Under the intimidation of the beast god clock, the immortal phoenix king's speed was greatly reduced, could only endure the attacks. If it wasn't for its powerful recovery ability, it would have died long ago. However, after this, even if he didn't die, he would still die. Divine Sword Technique. A heaven-piercing divine sword fell and slashed at the deathless Phoenix King. Although the immortal Phoenix King's recovery ability was extraordinary, it could not withstand the instant killing effect of the divine sword technique. In an instant, the immortal Phoenix King was killed. Immediately after, the drop of pseudo-divine blood appeared in front of Yixian again. However, this time the drop of blood essence was 1 size bigger than before. There is no system notification. It seems that the divine blood demon king is not dead yet. Destroy it! Yixian immediately gave the order and attacked himself at the same time. However, at this moment, whoosh! This drop of pseudo-divine blood vibrated violently again, and then swept toward the ground. Want to leave? Stay. Although Yixian resisted with all his strength, this drop of pseudo-divine blood was the blood essence of a fake god. It instantly sent the sword god doppelganger flying and burrowed into the ground. Yixian hurriedly ordered everyone to burrow into the ground. He had already let the divine blood demon king escape twice. He could not let it happen a 3rd time. However, at this moment, rumble! The ground suddenly began to tremble violently. No one knew what had happened. Immediately after, a terrifying aura spread, causing Old Tree and others to tremble. Bang! Suddenly, a shocking giant hand reached out from the ground and directly grabbed Yixian and others. Ding! Flame Swallow Unicorn is dead. Ding! Black Scale Dragon Swallow is dead. Ding! Black Gold Sword Servant is dead. A series of death notifications sounded in Yixian's mind. This giant hand directly crushed everyone except the sword god doppelganger to death. What kind of terrifying power was this? What the hell is this? Yixian raised his eyebrows but could not break free from the giant hand. He could only watch as the giant slowly climbed out of the ground. This was a red giant with red hair and red eyes. It was at least 10,000 meters tall. The aura on its body was terrifying to the extreme. It was at least a high-level undying dominator. Boy, you didn't expect this, did you? At this moment, the red giant suddenly opened its mouth to speak. Divine Blood Monster King? Yixian raised his eyebrows. Yes, it's me. The red giant snorted and nodded. Why do you think I came here and controlled a group of undying divine phoenixes to ambush you? I'm just toying with you. Do you think you can kill the great me with these tricks of yours? How ridiculous. It would be too boring to kill you directly, so I want to see what kind of expression you have when you see my new face. Hearing this, Yi Xian could not help but sneered. Your new face is not that great. Ignorant child, this giant is the original body of the blood flame giant. It was a false god expert when it was alive. When I found it, it was just a dried corpse. After these days of splitting, I finally resurrected it. The divine blood monster king sneered. Do you think you can compete with it with your current realm? Ridiculous, I was only a false god when I was alive. If you have the guts, why don't you try to kill me? Yi Xian was in disbelief. Shameless boasting. Since you asked for it, I'll fulfill your wish. The divine blood monster king immediately squeezed with all his strength, but to his surprise, he could not hurt Yi Xian. Is your body also a false god body? The divine blood monster king asked in surprise. Yes, mine is also a false god body. Why are you disappointed? Yi Xian immediately replied. Hearing this, the divine blood monster king could not help but show a greedy expression. At this moment, Yi Xian was in his hands. Although he could not hurt Yi Xian, he could first trap him. When he grew to the false god level, it would be Yi Xian's time of death. However, at this moment, the seventh layer of heaven suddenly cracked open. Immediately after, a ray of red light descended. Yi Xian and the divine blood monster king turned to see a red-haired man walking out of the red light. Chapter 2083. Brother, you didn't die? The red-haired man was pleasantly surprised when he saw the flaming blood giant. The divine blood monster king froze and quickly searched the memories of the fake god's corpse. Then he clenched Yi Xian tightly and smiled. Big brother. The newcomer had sensed the aura of the flaming blood giant, so he had come from the eighth heaven. He was the younger brother of the fake god that had just been resurrected. However, he did not know that the flaming blood giant had already been possessed by the divine blood monster king. Brother, there has been no news of you all these years. I've already run around the seventh heaven countless times. I was just about to go back when I sensed your aura, the red-haired man said in surprise. He had already broken through the seventh heaven and was about to return to the eighth heaven. Big brother, I was harmed by a villain and fell into a deep sleep. I just woke up today. As the divine blood demon king spoke up to hear, his attention fell onto Yi Xian. Big brother, I just woke up and this brat angered me. This kid also has a fake god body. With my current strength, I can't hurt him. Please help me. Hearing this, the red-haired man raised his eyebrows. Humph, how dare you provoke the flaming blood giant family? You're courting death. Whoosh. Before he finished speaking, a sword aura shot toward Yi Xian. Tch. Yi Xian did not care at all. Regarding the sword god avatar, he had always been indifferent. He had never seen anyone who could hurt the sword god avatar. However, his smile froze in the next moment. Ding! The sword god avatar's invincible body has been broken. The damage is 13%. This system notification shocked Yi Xian. The invincible body of the sword god avatar was broken? Invincible? Wasn't it supposed to be invincible? What a joke. Yi Xian's face darkened. He guessed that the invincible body of the sword god avatar had a limit. Once the attack exceeded that limit, it would be damaged. Most importantly, Yi Xian did not know what would happen if the invincible body was damaged. Would it die or need to be repaired? Ding! The sword god avatar is currently in a semi-invincible state. It will be damaged if it is attacked by an attack 5 levels higher than the original body. The system prompted again. Currently, Yi Xian was a rank 9 sovereign. This meant that the sword god's avatar would be injured by a rank 5 undying sovereign. Damn it! Yi Xian cursed in his heart. This damned red-haired man had actually injured the sword god's doppelganger. The red-haired man raised his hand and struck the invincible body of the sword god doppelganger down by 13%. If he struck again, the sword god doppelganger would most likely die. Not to mention the red-haired man. The sword god body was so fragile that even the flaming blood giant possessed by the sacred blood demon king could easily destroy it. Go! In the sky, Yi Xian's eyes flashed as he quickly put away the sword god clone. He didn't dare to let the Sword God's clone take the risk. Just like that, the Sword God's avatar disappeared from the flaming blood giant's hand, leaving the Sacred Blood Demon King and the red-haired man in shock. At this moment, somewhere in the seventh heaven, Yi Xian's original body hurriedly used the Void Spirit Divine Armor to hide. He only hoped that the red-haired man would not search the seventh heaven. Otherwise, he would be in trouble. An expert of this level could easily kill him. Although he had a doppelganger in the mortal world and the lower heaven, it would be troublesome if they died. I still have 3 devour points that I haven't used, but I can't let the Sword God's doppelganger take the risk. It's better to be safe and bear this grudge for now. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and decided not to seek revenge on the Sacred Blood Demon King for the time being. The red-haired man from the Flaming Blood Giant was at least a false god and was very strong. With his current strength, only death awaited him if he went to find the red-haired man. At this moment he felt that the Sacred Blood Demon King was moving. Fortunately, the Sacred Blood Demon King was moving upwards. Not only that, but so was the red-haired man. This meant that the Sacred Blood Demon King was being led away from the 7th heaven by the red-haired man and heading towards the 8th heaven. It seemed that the Sacred Blood Demon King didn't take him seriously. After all, the Sacred Blood Demon King was now occupying the Flaming Blood Giant's false god body. If he returned to the Flaming Blood Giant family, he should be able to recover his false god status very quickly. After the two left, Yi Xian didn't have any more misgivings and immediately split up to act. He had to break through to the Undying Sovereign level as soon as possible and then reach the peak of the Undying Sovereign level. Only by becoming a false god could he break through the 7th heaven and go to the 8th heaven, then seek revenge on the Sacred Blood Demon King and the red-haired man. In the following time, Yi Xian was constantly on the move. The amount of divine blood he needed was 10 times that of the average person. To break through to the Undying Sovereign level, he needed to refine 11,111 drops of false god blood. After that, he would need the same amount of false god blood for each level. However, after breaking through to the Undying Sovereign level, the speed at which he collected false god blood doubled. This was because those large families had large amounts of false god blood. Unfortunately, whether it was half-step sovereigns, or undying sovereigns, they couldn't condense false god blood after death like Tianming. After all, they weren't false gods. Otherwise, Yi Xian's collection speed would greatly increase. Finally, after more than a month, Yi Xian collected more than 90,000 drops of false god blood. At this time, he was already a 9th grade Undying Sovereign. He still needed 2,000 drops of false god blood to reach 100,000 drops of false god blood. At that time, he could condense his Dao heart into a false divine spark and become a false god. At this time, he arrived in front of a top city in the 7th heaven. This would be Yi Xian's last stop in the 7th heaven. This was because he could obtain the last 2,000 drops of false god blood in this city. In addition, this city had a teleportation array that led to the 8th heaven. Kill! Yi Xian didn't say anything and directly summoned the old tree and black horn. With Yi Xian's current 9th grade Undying Sovereign level, he didn't need help at all. He could destroy this city by himself. He summoned the old tree and black horn because the old tree and black horn could help him devour. He couldn't wait. Immediately, the 3 of them killed their way into this top city in the 7th heaven. The city lord of this top city was a 9th grade Undying Sovereign. When he sensed Yi Xian's 3 auras, he was so scared that he almost wet himself. A 9th grade Undying Sovereign was enough to dominate a place in the 7th heaven. Everyone generally minded their own business. Why would 3 9th grade Undying Sovereigns suddenly appear now? What are you doing in my territory? The city lord immediately jumped into the sky and looked at Yi Xian's trio rushing toward him. Unexpectedly, Yi Xian didn't have any intention of answering him. Death warrant. Eye of assassination. Chapter 2084. RIP. The city lord's head flew into the air. He was killed in an instant. Yi Xian was now a 9th grade Undying Dominator. Killing an opponent of the same level was a piece of cake for him. He immediately put away the city lord's interspatial ring. Ding! The host has refined 2,367 drops of pseudo-god blood. Ding! The host's Taoist heart has been refined and is about to transform. Ding! The pseudo-god lattice has been condensed. Ding! The host has broken through to the pseudo-god realm. The host is now a first-grade pseudo-god. Finally, Yixian broke through to the pseudo-god realm. Following his breakthrough, Old Shu and Black Horn also made breakthroughs one after another. Then they quickly absorbed the entire city into the devouring space. After breaking through to the pseudo-god realm, all the blood in my body has been transformed into pseudo-god blood. At the same time, a part of my saint power has been transformed into more powerful pseudo-god power. Yixian thought to himself as he took out a drop of pseudo-god blood. After more than a month of killing, he had learned many things. For example, if he wanted to break through to the pseudo-god realm, he had to increase his pseudo-god power. If he wanted to increase his pseudo-god power, he could absorb pseudo-god crystals or extract some pseudo-god power from the pseudo-god blood and refine it for his own use. Of course, the pseudo-god power contained in the pseudo-god blood was very little. If he wanted to extract a pseudo-god crystal from the pseudo-god blood, he would need an astronomical amount of pseudo-god blood. With my current strength, although I may not be able to defeat that red-haired man, I already have the qualifications to go to the 8th heaven. Yixian thought to himself. Now that the sword god avatar was damaged by 13%, he would need good things to repair it. Previously, the devouring space had been torn apart, and Yixian had to pay a huge price to repair it. In addition to the necessities for repairing the sword god avatar, he could also choose to use devouring points to repair it. One devouring point could repair 20% of the damage. Although Yixian currently had 3 devouring points, he was still hesitating. When the invincible body of the sword god's doppelganger was not broken, it could at least withstand the attacks of an expert of a higher realm. Now that it has been broken, it can only withstand the attacks of experts of a higher realm. I'd better repair it. As Yixian thought to himself, he spent the remaining 3 devour points to repair the sword god's doppelganger. He only found out about this after the invincible body of the sword god doppelganger was broken. At that time, the bloody flame giant that the divine blood demon king had occupied happened to be a 9th grade undying dominator, which was within the invincible range. However, the red-haired man was a false god, at least 10 levels higher than Yixian. That was why the sword god doppelganger was damaged. Ding! Repair successful. Ding! The sword god's doppelganger's current damage is 0. He has regained his invincible body. Let's go, we'll go to the 8th heaven first. Yixian narrowed his eyes and used the teleportation array to teleport to the 8th heaven. He had finally arrived at the 8th heavenly layer. He was only 1 step away from Lula's 9th heaven. The 8th heaven was very close to the 9th heaven. Here, undying dominators were as common as dogs, and false gods were everywhere. Yixian, a first-grade false god, was just the beginning in the 8th heaven. At this time he turned his head and looked to the north, where there was a scarlet kill character. The target of the death hunting order was in the north. However, the divine blood demon king was quite a distance away from him. Immediately he rushed to the north. While searching for the divine blood demon king, he also constantly collected the treasures of the surrounding forces. With his first-grade false god realm, it was easy for him to fight a 4th-grade false god alone. If he launched a group attack, even a 5th-grade false god would have to suffer. As a result, his cultivation base also began to rise continuously. In just a few days, his cultivation base broke through from 1st-grade false god to 3rd-grade false god. At the same time, he also heard a piece of news. The north is the territory of the Bloody Flame Giant clan. However, I heard that the Bloody Flame Giant clan has started to expand their territory, and a large number of false divine beasts have come to join them. Yixian thought to himself. He had learned these things from other people's memories. As for the Bloody Flame Giant, it was said that he was the descendant of a divine beast, and was extremely powerful. However, the divine beast ancestor went to the 9th heaven, so the Bloody Flame Giant clan's situation deteriorated. After a certain battle, only a few 7th-grade false gods were left. However, Yixian heard that the Bloody Flame Giant clan had risen again during this time, and a demigod expert had appeared. What was the reason? The rise of the Bloody Flame Giant clan coincides with the arrival of the Divine Blood Demon King in the 8th heaven. Could it be the Divine Blood Demon King? Yixian raised his eyebrows. Based on the attack power of the red-haired man that day, that red-haired man should only be a low-grade false god. Otherwise, the sword god clone would have been killed instantly. If that red-haired man was only a first-grade false god, he would be 10 levels higher than the 9th-grade sword god clone. He would be able to break the sword god clone's invincible body. After all, the sword god clone's invincible body could only block attacks from 9 levels higher. Whether it is or not, I'll know when I get there. Yi Xian thought to himself as he entered the territory of the Bloody Flame Giant clan. Following the rise of the Bloody Flame Giant clan, a large number of false divine beasts had come to join them, and it was said that they had all improved. Therefore, there was a large number of false divine beasts in the Bloody Flame Giant clan. It just so happens that I can collect high-grade bloodlines on the way to the Bloody Flame Giant clan, and see if I can awaken the 100-beast sword servant. Yi Xian thought to himself. Previously, he had killed the Undying Phoenix and Immortal Phoenix. These 2 bloodlines were included in the 100 bloodlines needed to awaken the 100-beast sword servant. In addition, Yi Xian had also killed many false divine beast sword servant, so he had collected 18 bloodlines. Now he had arrived at the 8th heaven, where all the false divine beasts had noble bloodlines. They should have reached the standard. Not long after entering the territory of the Bloody Flame Giant clan, Yi Xian encountered a group of false divine beasts. These false divine beasts were called heaven-devouring rats. It was said that they had the ability to destroy the sky, and they moved in groups. They would often break open the sky and wreak havoc in the 6th and 7th heavens. Yi Xian sensed for a moment and found that this group of heaven-devouring rats were only 6th-grade false divine beasts. There was nothing to be afraid of. Immediately, he released the old tree and the others and began to clean up this group of heaven-devouring rats. Sure enough, the heaven-devouring rat bloodline had been recognized by the system, and Yi Xian would be able to awaken the 100-beast sword servant sooner. Immediately, Yi Xian began to search the souls of these heaven-devouring rats. Chapter 2085. The heavenly treasures that Fairy Luli gave Yi Xian before were actually enough to create several experts at the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension stage. Now, if he wanted to raise his cultivation from the 8th level of the Heaven Ascension stage to the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension stage, the amount of heavenly treasures consumed would probably be several times more than before. However, he understood that Fairy Luli would definitely be willing to part with it. Alright, I'll give it to you. Fairy Luli clenched her teeth and directly threw out all sorts of treasures from her interspatial ring. Even Lin Guangyao would be envious of these priceless treasures. This time Fairy Luli had really gone all out. This time I'm betting on you. If you fail, pay me back tenfold. Fairy Luli suddenly said, a little stingy. Alright. Yi Xian didn't haggle anymore. He could easily defeat Lin Guangyao now, so his strength was probably at the top. If he were to make another breakthrough, who would be able to fight him? Don't be careless. Although your strength is above Lin Guangyao's, there's still a gap between you and those top geniuses. Those people all have the ability to cross the immortal tribulation, but they have been suppressing their cultivation. Their cultivation is extremely terrifying, even comparable to a loose immortal. You have to pay special attention to the 2 troublesome people from the Holy Land of Death and the Holy Land of Netherworld. Fairy Luli reminded. Although Lin Guangyao was at the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension stage, his cultivation time was too short, and the people sent by the 3 Evil Path Holy Lands were probably 10,000 years old monsters. If one really had to compare, Lin Guangyao's strength could only be ranked in the 3rd tier. The 2nd tier were those who had lived for a long time, such as the experts from the 3 Evil Path Holy Lands. As for the 1st tier, it was the Platinum Holy Light Dragon Willful, the successor of the Emperor of Death, Jianxian, the Netherworld Prince, and so on. Although they were younger than the 2nd tier, they had powerful backgrounds and weren't easy to deal with. Take the Platinum Holy Light Dragon Willful for example. If he hadn't been beaten back to his original form, he would have been a loose immortal expert. Although these people were troublesome, Yi Xian wasn't afraid. After all, he had a few helpers. When he activated his ultimate move, even a loose immortal would do it. He, who hadn't even broken through, had already surpassed Lin Guangyao, so he was probably in the 2nd tier. If he broke through to the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension stage, then he would definitely be able to squeeze into the 1st tier. Ding Host has broken through. Currently at the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension stage. In an instant, Yi Xian's aura skyrocketed. Moreover, he'd reached the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension stage. Ding! Host has reached the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension stage. Ding! Host has reached the requirements for transcending the immortal tribulation. Ding! Host's current success rate for transcending the tribulation is 95%. Another 3 system beeps rang out. 95%. This probability was already high enough. Yixian estimated that as long as 3 clones fused together and increased his strength by 20%, he would be able to successfully transcend the tribulation. However, after successfully transcending the tribulation, he would still be unable to ascend to the immortal world, because the immortal world's passageway had been closed. However, he usually had to start cultivating as a loose immortal. Right now, he still had important matters to attend to, so Yixian wouldn't choose to transcend the tribulation. He actually broke through from the 8th level of the Heaven Ascension stage to the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension stage in an instant. This is really... Fairy Lu Li and the others were already shocked speechless. With your current cultivation, I'm afraid I won't even be able to block a single punch from you, Lin Guangyao said somewhat self-deprecatingly. He knew that Yixian's current strength should be squeezed into the 1st tier. He wasn't someone that he, who was in the 3rd tier, could fight against. Very good, with your help. My Glaze Knights will also have the capital to fight against the Sacred Land of Death and the Nether Sacred Land. Fairy Lu Li said to Yixian. Senior, don't worry. I have an 80% chance of obtaining the Sacred Master's token, Yixian said with a confident expression. All right. Fairy Lu Li was very satisfied. Next, it would depend on whether or not Yixian could truly obtain the Sacred Master's token. Tomorrow, they would head to the Penglai Demon Clan to discuss the battle plan. At that time, they would discuss how to deal with the evil Dao Holy Land. Very quickly, a day had passed. The Glaze Knights had a teleportation formation that led directly to the Penglai Demon Clan, so it was very convenient. On the 2nd day, Fairy Lu Li brought Lin Guangyao, Monkey Nian, and Yixian to the Penglai Demon Clan. Hua! The teleportation formation began to operate. Yixian was currently a bit excited because Luo Luo had been born in the Penglai Demon Clan. However, she had only been born not long ago and hadn't activated her inherited memories, so she probably wouldn't be able to recognize him. At this moment, Yixian's vision blurred, and his senses suddenly intensified. Although Luo Luo had been reborn, there was still a connection between her and Yixian. When Yixian landed on the ground, he could sense that Luo Luo was in the north and was very close. However, there was already a group of people from the demonic clan waiting at the teleportation palace. Greetings, Fairy Lu Li. An old man came up to him and said, This old man is Yao Shan. I've been waiting here for a long time. Have the other forces arrived? Fairy Lu Li asked directly. Yes. This Yao Shan nodded. Although it wasn't the agreed time yet, the Glaze Knights, who had the teleportation formation, were the last to arrive. This was a bit helpless. Immediately, Yao Shan brought Fairy Lu Li and the other 3 to the discussion hall. Other than the Penglai demon race, there were also the Heaven's End Palace, the Glaze Knights, and the Life Sacred Land. Thus, they were a 4-way alliance. Very quickly, Yixian and the other 3 were brought to the discussion hall. At this moment, there were already quite a few people in the Penglai demon race's discussion hall, and they weren't weak either. The weakest of them was at the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension realm. One of them was even a loose immortal expert. This person sat at the head of the table, and he was an acquaintance of Yixian. He was old immortal Tianju. Although he'd already guessed it, Yixian couldn't help but sigh in his heart after seeing old immortal Tianju's true body. Fuck, this is a true hidden expert. When he was still a sovereign, he had already seen old immortal Tianju. Now, he was at the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven Ascension realm, and he had crossed the 3 minor disasters in the 9 heavenly realms. No one would have thought that the mysterious person who had appeared in that remote and desolate Bloodstone continent was actually a loose immortal. Although the old immortal Tianju there was only a clone, it was still shocking enough. Yixian followed Fairy Lu Li into the discussion hall, and immediately became the focus of attention. Everyone had heard of Lin Guangyao. The One Thought monk's appearance and attire were rather eye-catching, so everyone could recognize him. However, where did this stranger Yixian come from? At this moment, there was another acquaintance of Yixian in the discussion hall, the Platinum Holy Light Dragon. He'd come as well. Hey Xian. When Willfulness saw Yixian, he immediately greeted him. Chapter 2086. At that moment, Yi Xian put away the corpse, drew out the blood, and refined it into pseudo-god crystals. Coupled with the huge amount of resources in the interspatial ring, Yi Xian directly broke through. Ding! Host has broken through. Currently a 6th grade pseudo-god. Following Yi Xian's breakthrough, Old Tree and the others also broke through one after another. Now, even without the help of the 100 Beast Sword Servants, Yi Xian could easily flatten the Blood Flame Giant clan. One of the targets is in the Blood Flame Giant clan, and the other is underground. Yi Xian glanced over. Needless to say, the death warrant on the mainland should be the red-haired man from that day. As for the one underground, it should be the Divine Blood Monster King. Go! At that moment, Yi Xian ordered the Sword God Doppelganger, Old Tree, and Black Horn to rush underground. However, at that moment the ground suddenly began to tremble violently. Then, a dragon's roar came from underground, shaking heaven and earth. Rumble! In front of Yi Xian, a blood-red dragon rushed out from underground. In an instant a blood-red light flashed, dyeing the dark clouds in the sky red. The Divine Blood Monster King has finally come out? Yi Xian looked at the blood-red dragon and the scarlet kill above its head and couldn't help but murmur. However, this blood-red dragon's aura was more than 10 times stronger than that of the Blood Flame Giant clan's leader. The Divine Blood Monster King was no longer a pseudo-god. It had probably become a demigod. A demigod was half a step into the immortal state. It was many times stronger than a pseudo-god. However, Yi Xian was not weak. Kid, you're quite capable to be able to chase me from the 7th to the 8th heaven. This blood-colored heavenly dragon opened its bloody maw and let out a deafening roar. This should be the body of a demigod, right? Yi Xian asked coldly. That's right. This is the body of a demigod under the blood-red forest. The Divine Blood Monster King replied. Even Yi Xian did not expect there to be a demigod in the Scarlet Forest. No wonder those who tried to explore underground never appeared again. At that time, Yi Xian actually wanted to send the Sword God clone down, but because his realm was too low, he didn't go. Later on, he triggered a random mission and went after the Sacred Blood Demon King. But when he returned to the Scarlet Forest, it had disappeared. He guessed that it was the work of the Divine Blood Demon King. Now it seemed that this was indeed the case. You're quite impressive. You actually turned on your master. Yi Xian said. This blood heavenly dragon was a demigod when it was alive. It was unknown why it had fallen in the 7th heaven. After the Blood Sky Dragon died, it formed the Blood Forest, and the blood essence in its body turned into a Divine Blood Demon King. Hearing this, the Divine Blood Beast King coldly snorted. What do you mean by devouring his master? He died because he was incompetent. I replaced him. Alright, whatever you say. Anyway, I'm here for revenge today. Yi Xian said. Revenge? The Divine Blood Demon King was slightly surprised. He was the one who wanted to take revenge on Yi Xian. How did it become Yi Xian taking revenge on him? How dare a speck of light compete with the bright moon? I want to see how you fight against my demigod body. After saying this, the Divine Blood Demon King transformed into a beam of blood light and swept toward Yi Xian. Yi Xian was very confident this time. Because the Sword God clone's invincible body had been fully restored, he was not afraid at all. Otherwise, the Sword God clone could only block attacks of level 5 and below at most. As long as the Divine Blood Demon King's realm was not that of a level 7 demigod, he could not hurt the Sword God clone. In an instant, Old Tree, Black Horn, and the others all charged over. As for the Sword God clone, he first secretly put away the 100 Beast Sword Servants and then charged over as well. He wanted to see how strong the Divine Blood Demon King was. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, an earth-shattering battle broke out in the sky. Yi Xian currently had 3 people on his side. They were the Sword God clone, Old Tree, and Black Horn. Because one of them had an invincible body, and the other 2 had unlimited resurrection. As for the Sword Servants, Yi Xian temporarily put them away because there would be a cooldown time after they died. However, Yi Xian had underestimated the Divine Blood Demon King. As soon as they started fighting, Old Tree and Black Horn were killed by the Divine Blood Demon King. However, the Sword God clone was still standing strong. A false god already has a false god persona and then condenses false god power. A demigod has already raised the false god power to the peak, which is demigod power. Then they used demigod power to refine their body into demigod meridians, which is why their physique is extremely strong. As Yi Xian thought, he controlled the sword god clone to attack the Divine Blood Demon King. Judging from the Divine Blood Demon King's attack power, he should be around the level of a level 1 demigod. It's only because you've crossed a level so your strength has increased a little. However, you still have to die today. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes suddenly lit up. In the next moment, the Black Gold Sword Servants, Immortal Sword Servants, 5 Elements Sword Servants, and 100 Beast Sword Servants appeared instantly. 100 Beasts Parade. The 100 Beast Sword Servants immediately used their ultimate move. Then gold-level Ares mounts appeared one by one. Among them, there were platinum-level Ares mounts. There were exactly 100 of them in total. This 100 Beast Parade was the ultimate move of the 100 Beast Sword Servants. Moreover, it was combined with the Ares mount skill, so the beasts summoned were at least gold level. Large and small battle beasts filled the sky, surrounding the Divine Blood Demon King. Divine Blood Demon King, today is the day you die. Go. At Yi Xian's command, hundreds of gold-level beasts charged toward the Divine Blood Demon King. Among them, there were even 5 platinum-level super beasts. The Divine Blood Demon King was frightened by such a lineup. However, the demigod body he occupied was the bloodthirsty Sky Dragon, a descendant of a divine beast with a super physique. Attacks landed on his body one after another, but they were either scattered by the flowing blood chi or blocked by the dragon's scales. The only attacks that could really hurt the bloodthirsty Sky Dragon were the few platinum-level beasts. Of course, there were also the 5 Elements Sword Servants and the 100 Beast Sword Servants. However, the wounds on the bloodthirsty Sky Dragon were automatically healed by the blood chi soon after they appeared. Ha ha ha. You think you can win by outnumbering me? The Divine Blood Demon King laughed. With a swing of his dragon tail, several gold-level Ares mounts exploded. Really? Then why don't you try this? Yi Xian sneered. In the next moment, Wei Zhentian suddenly appeared. Beast God Clock. Suppress. In an instant, the Divine Blood Demon King's laughter stopped abruptly. He felt that his physique had decreased by at least 80%. What happened? He suddenly recalled that the same thing had happened to him when he was in the Scarlet Forest.